Trepanation to release spirits. Imagine standing in a circle while slowly piercing a person's skull. Not to hurt them, but to help them. Without anesthesia, without an operating room, just bone, blood, and faith. Trepanation, the act of piercing the skull, is one of humanity's oldest medical rituals. And for thousands of years, it was not performed to remove tumors or relieve inflammation. It was done to release spirits. In the Neolithic, people believed that diseases, madness, or even persistent sadness came from within. But not in the way we understand it today. They believed that the body could be invaded by dark and malevolent forces, and that the only way to release them was to open a door. And that's what they did. Skulls with perfect circular holes have been unearthed all over the world, some completely healed. Peru, France, Russia. Each is a silent testimony to a belief so strong that people were willing to pierce their heads to expel the invisible. The process was brutal. Stone tools tore through skin and bone. And yet, many survived. Some even had multiple trepanations, suggesting that the ritual was not always a last resort. Sometimes it was repeated, sometimes it was preventive. In some cultures, it was not done to heal, but to illuminate, to open the mind, to invite visions. The line between healing and transformation was thin and sometimes invisible. Pain was part of the process, and relief was not measured only in terms of survival. It was measured in terms of peace. The surprising thing is that it was not a marginal belief. It was widespread. It spread across all continents. People without contact, without a common language, all turned to the same hole in the head as an answer. Why? Because the unknown terrifies us. And when fear has no name, it is given one. When suffering has no origin, one is invented. Trepanation was not just a medical act. It was a spiritual narrative, a ritual that turned invisible chaos into something tangible, something that could be cut, removed, released. And although we no longer drill holes to ward off demons, we still want relief to come cleanly and surgically. We continue to seek the inner darkness and wonder how to get it out. And sometimes, if we look closely at what came after in human beliefs, we will see that the door never completely closed. It just moved. It began to open elsewhere. The cargo cults of the Pacific. Something extraordinary happened in the remote islands of Melanesia. During World War II, foreign soldiers arrived with huge ships, strange machines, and endless supplies. They built runways, dropped food from the sky, spoke through metal boxes, and then disappeared. For the islanders who saw this, it was nothing less than divine. They had seen the gods, or at least that's what it seemed to them. The cargo, boxes of medicine, clothing, and canned food, arrived in thunderous planes. The soldiers received these gifts effortlessly, as if they had summoned them from the clouds. So the islanders built replicas of what they saw. They carved headphones out of wood. They made radios with bamboo. They built full-scale runways and waited for the sky to respond. It was not a mockery. It was adoration. Sincere, reverent, and desperate. They believed that if they imitated rituals, the gods would return. If the landing strips were clean, if the imitation radios were in place, if the men stood firm like soldiers, then maybe, just maybe, the sky would open again. These movements became known as cargo cults. It was not simply about material goods. It was about finding meaning, about trying to make sense of an unimaginable power that had suddenly fallen into a world without warning or explanation. The islanders were not fools. They were human. They observed, interpreted, and adapted like all of us. And if the logic seems strange to us, let's think about this. How is it different from our own rituals, our sacred routines, our symbols to which we give more importance than to substance, our desperate imitation of those who seem to have what we want? Even now, we act without always understanding why. We imitate success. We follow formulas. We trust that if we build the right structures, careers, lifestyles, and images, something will descend. Recognition, wealth, peace, as if it were a shipment. The islanders waited for airplanes. We wait for moments, for meaning to arrive in elegant containers, for validation to fall from the sky. But what if it never arrives? What if the sky remains silent no matter how much we prepare the runway? What if, in trying to imitate the miraculous, we lose sight of what is really here under our feet, which is already ours, but invisible to those who keep looking up? The belief in the flat Earth. You might think that the idea of a flat Earth was left behind in antiquity, replaced by satellites, space flights, and photos of our blue and round planet. But the belief never really disappeared. It simply changed shape. In the early civilizations, the Earth was not a sphere. It was a platform, a disk, sometimes square, sometimes round, but always flat. It floated in a vast cosmic sea. The skies arched over it like a dome. The underworld opened below. In Mesopotamia, Egypt, and even in early Hebrew cosmology, this was not a metaphor. It was the map, and people lived on it as if it were obvious. Why would they believe the opposite? The ground under your feet is firm. The horizon is straight. Water does not slip off the edges of a lake. And when you look up, the sun and the moon do not orbit around you. They pass overhead like lights suspended from the ceiling. It made sense. But long after science proved the curvature of the Earth, something remained. In the 19th century and again in the modern era, flat Earth believers resurfaced not only with skepticism, but with certainty. They organized conferences, printed maps, published videos. They questioned NASA. They rejected photographs. For them, the globe was a lie, a conspiracy, a modern myth. Why? Because belief in the flat Earth is not just about shape. It's about control. It is about who you trust to tell you what is real. And when that trust breaks, when institutions feel distant, arrogant, or false, some look down and decide that they will only believe what they can see. And if that is the Earth, then it must be flat. It is tempting to laugh, but laughter often hides fear. Because what this belief reveals is not stupidity. It is longing, a desire for certainty, a cosmos that feels honest, visible, explainable. Not a cold universe that revolves in infinite darkness, but a world on human scale, stable and small. In a way, it is comforting. And maybe that's the point. Belief is often not about truth. It is about security. And when reality seems too vast to understand, some flatten it so they can hold it in their hands. But there are others who choose a stranger path, not to reduce the world, but to delve into its mysteries. And some do it in silence, sitting, breathing, waiting for death, not with fear but with discipline. Living mummified monks. Deep in the mountains of Japan, some monks prepared for death, not as an end, but as a final offering. Over the years, they slowly transform into relics, not through death by time or disease, but through a ritual of intention, of unimaginable self-discipline. The practice is called Sokushin Butsu. It begins with a strict diet. Only nuts, seeds, roots, and tree bark. No cereals, no meat. The monk endures this for 1,000 days, stripping the body of fat. Then comes the next phase, drinking a poisonous tea made with Yushir tree sap. This does not kill them. It preserves them. It makes the body toxic to insects, preventing decomposition. Finally, the monk locks himself in a stone tomb large enough to sit in meditation. A bamboo tube allows air to pass through. Each day, he rings a bell to indicate he is still alive. One day, the bell stops ringing. The tomb is sealed. He has disappeared, but belief says he has not died. In the following years, the tomb is opened. If the monk's body has not decomposed, if it has remained intact, still sitting, still serene, then he is no longer a man. He is a Buddha, a saint, a sacred bridge between life and eternity. It is not about mythological tales. These mummified monks still exist. Their bodies lie in shrines covered with robes, honored with offerings, without eyes, without life, yet revered as if they were awake. For the Western mentality, this may seem grotesque, but for those who practice it, that Butsu is the highest form of devotion. The final lesson, a body turned into scripture. It is not just about transcendence. It is about control, about mastery over hunger, over pain, over fear itself. It is the idea that if you can discipline the body to such extremes, then the soul will transcend death, not in myth, but in matter. And perhaps in a world so obsessed with preserving youth, there is something quietly subversive in preserving death. Not hiding from it, but becoming it on your own terms. Not all monks who tried it became relics. Some decomposed, others were forgotten. But a few remained silent, vigilant, and just below their joined hands, one wonders what ancient knowledge they carried, what hidden vision they had, what sacred silence they chose to become. The adoration of snakes is divine. In many cultures, the snake is feared as a symbol of danger, a creature to be killed or avoided. But in others, it is something different, not a monster, but a god. In ancient India, snakes were sacred. They were called nagas, guardians of water, fertility, and hidden wisdom. They lived under the earth or in the depths of rivers. People built sanctuaries for them, left them offerings, and prayed for them to protect them. If a naga got angry, misfortune arrived. But if he was happy, blessings flowed. Duality was never far away. The snake as threat, the snake as savior. And it wasn't just in India. In some parts of Africa, the rainbow snake was a creator deity. In Mesoamerica, the feathered serpent Quetzalcoatl was a god of learning and wind. In Greece, snakes coiled around a staff with a snake's head, a symbol of healing that we still use today in medicine. Why the snake? Perhaps it is because it sheds its skin, dies, and is reborn. Perhaps it is because it moves silently, observes patiently, and attacks with precision. The snake seems eternal. It is neither mammal nor bird. It does not blink. It does not scream. It simply is. For ancient minds, that stillness was not cold. It was divine. In some temples, live snakes were kept as part of sacred rituals. In others, priests wore snake masks. And in many traditions, the coiled snake represented the energy of life itself, latent and waiting to awaken. Even in modern spiritual systems like Kundalini Yoga, the snake is still present. It is imagined as a force coiled at the spine's base. If it awakens, it rises, writhing upwards through the body, opening perception and shedding illusion. Snake worship is not superstition. Its metaphor became myth. It is reverence for the part of life that moves under the visible, the part that transforms through stillness, that waits, observes, and, when the time is right, changes everything. And like the snake, there are other creatures that we have misunderstood, other rituals that may seem unthinkable to outsiders until we observe them more closely. Next, one of the oldest funerary practices in human history. Strange, silent, and totally oriented towards the sky. The Zoroastrian celestial burials. High in the desert, where the wind never sleeps. The dead were abandoned to the sky. In the ancient Zoroastrian tradition, burial and cremation were not sacred. They were contamination. The body, once the soul abandoned it, was impure. Burying it in the earth meant infecting the earth. Burning it meant polluting the fire. Both elements were deemed sacred. So, instead, they turned to a third element, air. The solution was crude. The body was taken to a tower for silence. These towers, circular stone structures built on remote hills, were reserved for one purpose: exposure. The body was placed outdoors on concentric rings at the tower's top. The outermost circle was for men, the middle for women, and the innermost for children. Then they waited. The vultures arrived quickly, in dozens, sometimes hundreds. In a matter of hours, the flesh disappeared, devoured by the beaks and the bones. The sun did the rest. And when nothing but fragile bones remained, they were swept into the central well of the tower, where the wind and time disintegrated them. It was not brutality. It was purification. For outsiders, the practice seems grotesque. But for Zoroastrians, it was sacred. The body was no longer a person. It was a shell, and the sky would claim it. By giving the body to the birds, they believed they kept the sacred elements intact. The earth, fire, and water remained intact. It was also a potent reminder of impermanence. Seeing death not as something hidden, buried, or disinfected, but as part of a broader cycle. Flesh becomes flight, identity becomes dust, ego becomes silence. Today, the tradition faces obstacles. Urbanization has advanced. Vultures, once abundant, have almost disappeared due to poisoning and habitat loss. Some communities have turned to other methods. But in places where the towers are still preserved, the ritual continues silently, faithfully. There is something profound in its rawness. A belief system that faces death with open eyes, that refuses to disguise it, that turns the loss of a loved one into an offering, a surrender to nature. And when the tower is emptied and the bones swept away, what remains is not just death. It is clarity, a reminder that we own nothing, not even our remains. That what we are is borrowed, and what we leave behind is not a monument, but a gesture. And elsewhere, in another corner tradition, death does not always mean goodbye. In some cultures, it is simply a pause. Sometimes, the wedding comes after the grave. The ghost weddings of China. In a quiet town, a coffin is opened not to bury, but to marry the dead. Ghost weddings, or Minghun, have existed in some parts of China for centuries. The ritual is simple in form, but disturbing in meaning. A wedding between two deceased people, or, sometimes, between a living person and ghost. It may seem like a superstition from a fable, but this practice has roots in deep cultural beliefs. In traditional Chinese society, dying single was considered a tragic fate. Without a spouse, the spirit could wander restlessly, alone, dishonored. That is why families intervened. They found another dead soul, preferably of similar age, and celebrated a wedding. Paper effigies were burned and ceremonial rites celebrated. Sometimes full banquets were prepared, and other times the corpses were exhumed. It was not just about symbolic unions, but about acts of spiritual fulfillment. In some cases, a living person, often a man whose fiancé had died before the wedding, continued to marry her and remained celibate for life, honoring her ghost as his only wife. But, over time, the practice took on a darker shade. As demand grew, especially in rural areas, a disturbing trade arose. Black market agents began searching for women's corpses, sometimes through theft, sometimes in an even worse way, and selling them for ghost weddings. These aren't old stories, but current headlines. A practice that once sought peace for the dead began disturbing the living. Why did it continue? Because in many regions, the dead aren't separate from the living. They are part of the family. The ancestors must be honored. The spirits must be appeased. And harmony with the dead guarantees harmony for the living. In this worldview, a wedding doesn't end with death. It transcends it. Love, obligation, and ritual continue, resonating beyond the grave. Even today, ghost weddings are still celebrated, often in silence, discreetly, out of sight, under the weight of tradition and fear of restless spirits. And although the government has condemned this practice, some families will always believe that a soul without a partner is adrift. So they organize, mourn, and then celebrate. Not all cultures seek to restore the soul through marriage. In others, the ritual isn't about pairing spirits, but recovering them. Because sometimes a part of you doesn't die. It simply disappears. Shamanic soul retrieval. In many ancient cultures, disease wasn't only physical. It was spiritual, and healing didn't always come in the form of herbs, physical contact, or rest. It came through a journey to the invisible, to the dark places where something that was once whole had been lost. That was the shaman's job, and the disease was called soul loss. It was believed that during traumatic events, pain, violence, fear, a part of your soul could flee. Not figuratively, but literally. It escaped to avoid the pain, to survive what your body could not bear. And although you continued living, you lived with a void. In Siberia, in the Amazon, in North American indigenous traditions, this belief appeared again and again. The soul was not a single piece, but a constellation of parts, and sometimes a part left. The symptoms weren't only sadness. They were numbness, memory gaps, a feeling of floating through life, chronic fatigue without cause, as if something essential had slipped away silently and only an echo remained. The shaman did not treat the body. They closed their eyes, played a drum, inhaled smoke, and left. In trance, they traveled through the spiritual world. They followed threads, spoke with animal guides, searched for caves made of memories, fought against entities that clung to the fragment of the soul like moss to stone. And when they found it, if they found it, they brought it back. The return was not noisy. It was a sigh, stillness, a silence, the feeling that something forgotten had finally come home. To the Western ear, this may sound abstract, even fanciful. But let's think about how many times trauma leaves us feeling not broken, but fractured, divided between before and after, present but distant, aware of life but not within it. Soul retrieval isn't a cure. It is the recognition that healing isn't always about adding something new, but about recovering something lost. And although the language has changed, the idea endures in therapy, in working with dreams, and how we talk about feeling complete again. We don't always know what we have lost, but we feel its absence. The shaman's drum may be silent now, but the longing to return never abandoned us. And in the oldest cultures, the question was not only how to recover what was lost, but how to speak about what awaited us. Because when you don't know the answer, sometimes you break a bone and wait for it to tell you. Oracular bones and prophecies. Long before printed books or paper scrolls, before compasses or clocks, there were burned, broken bones, read as sacred writings. In ancient China, more than 3,000 years ago, prophecies were recorded on the shoulder blades of oxen and on the shells of turtles. These relics, known as oracular bones, were the first known form of Chinese writing. But they were not created for history. They were created to get answers. A ruler could ask, will the harvest be good? Will the war be successful? Will the child live? The questions were recorded on the surface. Then a hot rod was applied, causing the bone or shell to crack. The shaman, the diviner, or the king then interpreted the shape and direction of the crack. It was believed that the message did not come from logic, but from the ancestors, from the gods, from the deepest order under the visible. And when the prophecy was clear, it was also recorded, sometimes with terrifying precision. The harvest will be bad. A storm will arrive. The king will fall. It was not an uncommon practice. Thousands of oracular bones have been unearthed. Each of them is a frozen moment of fear and faith. Together they formed not only a chronology of political decisions and personal hopes, but also a vision of the world. For those who used them, the future was not random. It was knowable, not through observation or control, but through contact with forces beyond the veil. In a way, it was a system of logic, cause and effect, ask and receive. But unlike modern science, it did not require proof. It required trust. The bone was a bridge between flesh and spirit, between decision and destiny. It was not just a tool. It was a conversation, held with trembling hands and the hope that the fire would speak. And it wasn't just about kings. Entire communities based their lives on what the cracks revealed. Crops were planted. Wars were fought. Lives were saved or ended, not by evidence, but by the shape of fracture. It is easy to see this as something primitive. But even now we look for signs. We read the market. We read the stars. We check algorithms, horoscopes, patterns of behavior in search of what the bone once gave us. Certainty. The method has changed, but the longing has not. We want to know what is going to happen. We want to believe that chaos has shape, that there's a whisper in the noise. And in ancient China, they believed that if the ancestors gave you an answer, that also meant something else. That your right to govern was not only earned, but predestined. The mandate of heaven in China. What gives a ruler right to govern? In ancient China, it was not only divine blood or conquest. It was something more difficult to define, something that was earned, observed, and then judged from above. It was called the mandate of heaven. Unlike the divine right of kings in Europe, which affirmed that a ruler was chosen by God, the mandate of heaven was conditional. The sky gave its blessing, but could take it back. A good, just, and moral ruler maintained harmony. Nature flourished. The people prospered. But if corruption spread, if greed festered, if injustice accumulated in the walls of the palace, then the signs appeared. Famines, earthquakes, floods, revolts were no coincidences. They were verdicts. The sky spoke, and if judgment was clear, the people could respond not with prayers, but rebellion. Because when the mandate was lost, the emperor was no longer sacred. He was expendable. This idea created a strange kind of political theology. It kept power sacred, but not permanent. It demanded that rulers not only be strong, but just. And it gave the people a hidden weapon, moral justification. Dynasties rose and fell on this belief. When natural disasters occurred, rumors spread. Has the sky withdrawn its favor? Rebellions that seemed unthinkable became sacred acts. A new dynasty would arise, claiming the mandate. The cycle would begin again. It was a brilliant, self-correcting structure wrapped in divine language. It made change seem inevitable. It made revolution seem sacred. And it blurred the line between politics and prophecy. Even today, the echoes of the mandate are present, not only in Chinese history, but in the psychology of power. We continue to expect leaders reflect more than authority. We hope they represent justice, balance, and order. And when they don't, we look for signs. Approval ratings fall. Scandals arise. The sky seems to change. And although we don't say it aloud, a question boils below the surface. Have they lost the mandate? The ancient Chinese saw the sky as impersonal, not a god with face, but a principle with consequences. He did not get angry. He did not forgive. He simply withdrew. And when he did, the fall was rapid. It is a disturbing idea that right to govern is borrowed. That legitimacy is never permanent. That power sees itself erode the moment it forgets why granted. And while the sky watched from above, others believe that fire spoke from below, not in judgment, but in whispers, in temptations, in flames. The spirits of fire, jinn, live in the invisible folds of the world, where fire meets thought and shadow curls under silence. According to the Islamic tradition, the jinn were created from beings of smokeless fire, neither angelic nor human, but something in between. They were created before us. They walk among us and watch us constantly. Unlike the demons of Western tradition, jinn are not purely evil. They are beings with free will, capable of mercy, anger, love, and cruelty. They live in cities, they get married, and they have children. They sleep and wake up, they die, but their lives unfold in a parallel layer of reality to ours. And sometimes the veil becomes thinner. It is said that the jinn inhabit desolate places, abandoned ruins, caves, deserts, crossroads, places where the human world unravels. They sneak into the cracks of sound, into the void between words. Some whisper, some imitate, some possess. The stories are countless. A man disappeared into the dunes and returned speaking languages he had never learned. A woman who cried fire. Children who played with invisible friends who knew too much. The jinn are not fantasies. In much of the Muslim world, they are part of everyday life. They are blamed for diseases, consulted in dreams, and feared when things do not go well. There are rules. Never pour hot water into a drain without warning. Never go outside at sunset without whispering protection. Never insult the air because you never know who is listening. And if you anger one, if a jinn feels aggrieved, it can attach itself to you. Not visibly, but subtly. A state of mind, a series of misfortunes, a presence at the edge of sleep. Old stories tell of possession, but not always with screams. Sometimes it is a slow erosion, a darkening will, a hunger that you no longer feel as your own. The Quran itself recognizes their existence. Some jinn believe, others rebel, some listen to the prophets, others challenge them. The fallen one, the Satan of Islamic theology, was a jinn who refused to bow before Adam. His pride led him to exile, and from that exile arose a legacy of whispers. However, not all the jinn are hostile. Some are curious. Some simply live. Some offer help, though never for free. They are negotiators, merchants of secrets. They always want something in return. What makes them terrifying is not what they do, but how near they are. You may never see them, but they can see you. And if your path crosses theirs, the world's rules no longer apply. We like to think that what we don't see can't touch us. that the fire remains in the flame, that the spirits remain in the stories. But when the lights dim and your mind wanders, something old can wander with you. And sometimes, when you're halfway between wakefulness and sleep, they don't just watch, they sit down. Demons of sleep paralysis. You wake up, but you can't move. You open your eyes. The room seems familiar, dimly lit by light from the street. But something is wrong. You try to move your body, but nothing happens. Your limbs are paralyzed. Your breathing quickens. Then you notice it. The weight. A pressure on your chest. A presence in the corner. Watching you. Approaching. You're not alone. It is about sleep paralysis, a well-documented neurological phenomenon. The brain wakes before the body. The muscles remain blocked in REM sleep. It is the body's natural paralysis meant to prevent you from acting out your dreams. But the dream has not ended. It persists, it filters, and what appears in those moments has tormented humans for centuries. All cultures have a name for it. In Japan, it is Kashabari. In Newfoundland, it is the Old Witch. In Nigeria, the Devil on the Back. In Brazil, Pisadira, an old woman who tramples the chest of those who sleep face up after a large meal. In medieval Europe, it was called Mara, a demonic entity that suffocates those who sleep. Later, the word evolved, but the form remained. A shadow in the door, a figure at the foot of the bed, something that should not exist, but does. Some see red eyes. Others see their loved ones transformed into something else. Some see nothing, they only feel. The terror does not come from pain. It comes from impotence, from the inability to scream, to escape, to look away from the darkness. And, nevertheless, the experience is shared. People from all oceans, centuries, and belief systems describe the same thing. The weight, the observer, the unchanged yet strange room. This leads many to wonder, how can a brain malfunction produce such similar visions? Some researchers explain it as an archetype, the brain's ancient library of fears. Others suggest that it is the last fragments of the REM phase, misinterpreted by the awake mind. But there are those who do not believe it, because for them the figure was real. He knew things. He spoke. He touched. And sometimes he followed. In some traditions, sleep paralysis is not a disorder. It is a visit, a sign of spiritual sensitivity, a moment in which the barrier thins. In some shamanic cultures, it is considered a call, a sign that you have been marked, that something has detected you. Whether science or spirit, the fear is real. The suffocation, the dread, the feeling that you are prey to something ancient, patient, and invisible. But what if it doesn't end when you wake? And what if there are others, beings not born from sleep, but from form, who await the darkness not to stalk your dreams, but to put on your skin? The beliefs about skinwalkers. In the desert lands of the American Southwest, under stars so bright they seem to whisper, there are stories people don't tell lightly. They lower their voices. They look over their shoulders. And when the name is spoken, it is not said lightly. Skinwalker among the Navajo people. The word is Yinaldlishii. With it, he gets on all fours. A creature that was once human, but is now corrupt. A sorcerer who broke sacred laws to obtain the power to shapeshift and become a coyote, an owl, a wolf, or, sometimes, something in between. Skinwalkers are not just legends. They're not feared as folklore figures, but as real entities. The stories are not told to entertain, but to warn. According to tradition, a skinwalker is someone who has taken a dark path, committing an unthinkable act, often the murder of a close relative, in exchange for supernatural abilities. They wear the skins of animals. They move at impossible speeds. They imitate voices, call you by name, lure you into the darkness. They are said to control the minds of others, to steal faces, to appear as someone you know until you notice something strange. The voice is not quite right. The eyes are too still. Encounters with skinwalkers often begin with sound. Some scratches on the windows, someone on the roof, knocks where there is no one, and always the feeling of being watched, of being hunted. Skeptics dismiss these stories as fear born of isolation, of living in vast open lands under an infinite sky. But ask someone who has lived there, someone whose family doesn't talk about what happened that night, and you will hear something else. Neither belief nor disbelief, just silence. Among the Navajos, even talking about skinwalkers can attract their attention. Names have power, so tradition is shrouded in secrecy, spoken in shadows, not out of superstition, but out of caution. There's a deeper meaning, too. The skinwalker is not just a monster. It is a warning, a reminder of what happens when balance is broken. When a person abandons the sacred for selfishness, when knowledge is misrepresented, when power is stolen instead of earned. In many ways, the skinwalker embodies a recurring fear in cultures around the world. The shapeshifter, the deceiver, the one who puts on your skin, the one who gets too close, the one who becomes familiar. We like to think that evil is obvious, that we will see it coming. But stories like these remind us that it often does not come with a roar. It comes with a face you trust. And sometimes that is the real terror. Not what it is, but what it once was. Because in even older stories, the fall did not come from below, but from above. Not from wild beasts, but from beings who once served the light. The Watchers, the fallen angels. Long before the fall of Lucifer, there were other angels who separated. Not in defiance of God's authority, but in defiance of his distance. They were called Watchers. Mentioned in apocryphal texts such as the Book of Enoch, the Watchers were angels sent to observe humanity, guardians, witnesses. They were never intended to interfere, only observe. But observation became longing, and longing became descent. They fell not by rebellion, but by love, by desire, by curiosity. The Watchers descended from heaven and took human women as wives. Their unions gave rise to the Nephilim, giants of supernatural strength and knowledge, beings who were neither angels nor humans, hybrid creatures that terrorized the ancient world. It was not only lust that condemned the Watchers. It was what they taught. They brought knowledge that humanity should not possess. One taught the art of war. Another taught enchantments. One revealed how to read stars. Another how to manipulate roots and herbs. They transmitted forbidden wisdom, sorcery, metallurgy, and devouring. They illuminated too much, too soon. The result was chaos. The earth became violent. Civilization flourished, but so did corruption. The Nephilim became tyrants, and the sky, seeing what their silent observers had become, sent its judgment. The Watchers were thrown into darkness, imprisoned under mountains, chained until the end of time. Their children, the Nephilim, were destroyed in a great flood. But the story did not disappear. There are echoes left. Some see the myth of the Watchers as an ancient warning about forbidden knowledge, how power, even when given with love, can turn to poison. Others believe that the Watchers are still with us, not bound by chains, but by myth, by whispers, by rituals that invoke ancient names. The story touches something older than any religion, the fear that the sacred becomes corrupted, that even the divine can break, that the light can fall. And if it does, what does it become? Not all fallen beings grow horns. Some continue shining. Some are still beautiful. And that is what makes them dangerous. Because what if those who taught us about the stars never really left? What if they remain in the things we should never have known? What if their touch is still felt, not in blood, but in the shadows? Because in the following belief, it is not your soul that they want. It is your silhouette. Shadow thieves. There are stories whispered on every continent that say your shadow is not just a reflection. It is a bond, a silent twin, a thread that binds your spirit to the living world. And if something steals it from you, it takes away something more than your silhouette. In some parts of Africa, especially among the Kosa people, there's a belief that witchcraft can be practiced by capturing a person's shadow. Stealing the shadow is obtaining power over the soul. You don't need their blood. You don't need their hair. Only the shape they leave when the sun hits them, right? It sounds metaphorical until you hear the warnings. Don't let your shadow fall into sacred rivers. Don't let it cross certain thresholds. Don't walk carelessly at sunset, because if someone catches it, binds it, curses it, you may never fully return. The idea is not exclusive to Africa. In some parts of Southeast Asia, It is believed that stepping on someone's shadow can damage their life force. In Haitian voodoo, it is said that certain rituals separate the shadow from the body to perform witchcraft. In Central American folklore, shadow thieves are beings that stalk the lonely, waiting for the moment when your silhouette moves just beyond their reach. Even in ancient Egypt, the shadow was one of the essential parts of the soul. It accompanied a person throughout their life and remained even after death. Damaging it was undoing someone's existence, both in this world and the next. What is it about the shadow that feels so intimate to us? It knows you well. It is with you when there is nobody else. It imitates all your movements, but reveals nothing about your thoughts. It is a voiceless presence, a weightless companion, which makes it vulnerable. We tend to think that the soul is invisible, but these beliefs suggest quite the opposite. That perhaps the soul has an outline, that perhaps your spirit is drawn in light and molded into a shape, and that shape can be touched or taken. In many traditions, when a person gets sick for no apparent reason, when no medicine helps, they say someone has your shadow, the cure, a ritual, a return, a claim of that second self. Sometimes you must persuade the shadow. Sometimes you have to fight for it, but you must always get it back. Because living without your shadow is drifting, sleeping with your eyes open, moving through the world with a body that feels empty. And in one of the oldest mythologies, the being that shapes the earth, the sky, and the water, the one that weaves all life, moves like a shadow, but shines like a storm. The rainbow serpent as creator. Long before written words or carved monuments existed, before nations arose or borders were drawn, the first peoples of Australia spoke of a great being that glided across the land and shaped everything in its path. It was not a god in the Western sense, nor was it a beast. It was something far older. It was the rainbow serpent. In Aboriginal mythology, the rainbow serpent is one of the most sacred and enduring figures. Its body sculpted valleys. Its spirals became rivers. Its breath invoked the rain. As it moved, it created the earth. Hills, gorges, waterholes, and mountains. Where it rested, sacred places were born. Where it roared, laws were established. It is known by many names in hundreds of Aboriginal languages. Sometimes it is male, sometimes female, sometimes both. It gives life and also takes it away. It brings the floods that nourish and the storms that destroy. In some traditions, it carries ancestral spirits within its womb. In others, it gives birth to the very soul of the earth. The rainbow serpent is not a myth told just to entertain. It is a living law. Its history is fundamental to the dreaming, a complex spiritual framework that connects every rock, every tree, and every creature with a shared past. Dreams are not just history. They're something that still lives. A time outside of time in which the rainbow serpent continues to move, continues to shape, continues to observe. Walking the earth means walking its body. And the presence of the serpent is not always symbolic. In millennial cave paintings, large serpentine forms extend across the walls in ochre and charcoal tones. Even today, the elders still speak of its path. Children are warned not to disturb certain watering holes. Rituals are performed to honor her, not to adore her, but to remember, because forgetting is dangerous. The rainbow serpent maintains balance between creation and destruction, between respect and punishment. It teaches that all things are connected, the spirit, the earth, human beings, animals, and that when that connection is broken, chaos occurs. This belief is not naive. It is deep. In a world that increasingly sees nature as resource, the rainbow serpent reminds us that it is relationship. She is old. She is alive. And although she does not speak, she listens. For those who have never heard of her, the rainbow serpent may seem just another myth. But for those who know the land, it is the breath under the ground, the memory under the water, the warning in wind. And in other distant traditions of Australia, something else stirs the wind. Something that is not born of water or sky, but of emptiness, of hunger, something that never stops desiring. Hungry ghosts. Imagine dying and not moving on. Imagine a soul so consumed by desire that not even death can silence its hunger. In many Buddhist and Taoist traditions, there is a realm different from heaven or hell. It is called the world of hungry ghosts, and the beings that inhabit it are not evil, but empty. They are the preta in Sanskrit, the ague in Chinese. Once they were human, but their lives were full of greed, envy, or obsessive attachment. So when they died, their desires did not die with them. Instead, those desires grew and became teeth. Hungry ghosts are often depicted with a swollen belly and a neck as thin as a needle, with mouths too small to eat and throats too narrow to swallow. Some are said to vomit fire if they try to consume food. Others can only eat dirt or decomposition. The more they yearn, the more they suffer. But the punishment is not imposed. It is inherent. Their suffering is their longing, and they don't just live in another dimension. According to some beliefs, they walk beside us, invisible, prowling places of pain, attracted by offerings, smells, and emotions. They follow families. They torment homes, not out of malice, but out of necessity. That is why, during festivals such as the Month of Ghosts in some parts of East Asia, people leave food at their doors. They burn incense. They light lanterns to guide the spirits home. Rituals are not superstition. They are compassion, a way to feed what cannot be fed. But hungry ghosts are more than a myth. They are mirrors. They show us what desire becomes without limits, the longing that never learns to let go. They are what happens when identity is tied to need, when even the soul forgets how to feel full. Some interpret the myth psychologically, that the hungry ghost is a symbol of addiction, depression, or emptiness in a consumerist world, a modern hunger that food, attention, or wealth cannot satisfy. Because we have all felt it, that gnawing at the edge of thought, that belief that something is missing, that if we had one more thing, one more victory, then we would finally be complete. But the hungry ghost never gets enough, and so it wanders. According to some teachings, the only liberation is remembrance, gratitude, service, acts that break egoism's cycle and allow the ghost to rise from hunger and reach peace. Because what we carry in life does not always leave us when we die. And in another tradition, far from these ashes of longing, something else holds destiny's threads, silent, veiled, and weaving eternally in the darkness. The weavers of destiny. In the space between cause and consequence, there are silent, tireless, invisible hands that weave your destiny. In all mythologies, these hands belong to beings that do not govern by force, but weave. They do not hit or order. They weave. And in their threads are your beginnings, your endings, and everything you will never understand until it has happened. In ancient Greece, they were called the Moirai, three sisters, Clotho, who spun the thread of life, Lachesis, who measured it, and Atropos, who cut it. Even the gods were subject to their work. Not even Zeus could alter what they wove. In Norse mythology, the Norns carved destiny into the bark of the world tree, Yggdrasil. Three figures sitting again at the roots of all reality, writing the past, present, and future in runes that bled into all living beings. In the Vedic belief, goddesses like Rita and Lakshmi presided over the cosmic order. In Slavic myths, Rodzanica visited babies to whisper their destiny to them. In the West African tradition, Anansi, a spider, half trickster, half oracle, wove stories that intertwined life's paths with laughter and consequences alike. Through time, across continents, the pattern is clear. Destiny is not a path. It is a network, and the weavers are neither cold nor kind. They are determined. They do not interfere out of mercy. They do not punish out of anger. They only sow what must be sown. The terror is not in their cruelty. It is in their impartiality. They don't hate you. They don't care about you. And yet, every step you take may already be traced on a path they wove long ago. But not all stories make destiny absolute. In some beliefs, the thread can fray. A vow can alter the fabric. A sacrifice can buy new lines. In others, the network is constantly changing. It is a living being that transforms as you transform. And yet, The question remains, are we weaving too, or are we just being woven? Modern life rarely leaves room for these types of questions. We talk about free will, about self-authorship, but when things fit together too well or fall apart too quickly, we often look up or inward and wonder who is guiding us. Perhaps destiny is not always visible. Perhaps it is something felt in the pattern of repeated mistakes, in the coincidences that accumulate too precisely, in the moments when we meet someone and feel that we already know them. Not everything that moves us is visible. And for some, destiny not only shapes lives, it shapes legacies. Entire genealogical lines united by something older than law. Governors whose names never fade away. Kings who died but never stopped reigning. Divine kings who never die. Some governors wear gold crowns. Others carry eternity's weight. In ancient traditions, kings were not just political figures. They were receptacles chosen not only for their lineage or battles, but for the cosmos. Crowning them was channeling the divine. Obeying them was adoring them. In Egypt, the pharaoh was the living Horus, the falcon god's incarnation. Upon dying, he became Osiris, lord of the underworld. His reign did not end with death. It changed dimension. The tomb was not a burial. It was a throne turned inward. In Japan, the emperors descended from Amaterasu, the sun goddess. In the Inca Empire, the Sapa Inca was the son of Ini, a sun god. Each dawn confirmed his legitimacy. His voice was the law, not by decree, but by a divine echo. In Mesopotamia, kings claimed heaven's mandate long before the phrase reached China. There, emperors not only governed as men, but as the axis between earth and sky. Their failures caused earthquakes. Their virtues invoked the rain. And in West Africa, Yoruba kings were considered human deities on earth. Their words shaped the markets, the marriages, and the migrations. And when they passed away, their spirits were interwoven in sanctuaries, and their presence endured through the rituals. These kings did not limit themselves to governing lands. They governed time. Their stories extended through generations. They were not remembered as history, but as prophecy. Their actions became omens. Their lives became models, and in some cases, their deaths were illusions. In Tibet, the Dalai Lama is not a king, but embodies a similar cycle that reincarnates again and again, recognized in a child's eyes who rises once more to lead. In Ethiopia, legends say the Solomonic lineage descended from the union of King Solomon and the Queen of Sheba, linking their throne not to conquest, but divine romance. And in many places, when a king died too young or disappeared mysteriously, people refused to believe he was gone. They built myths about his return. Arturo in Great Britain, Federico in Germany, the hidden imam in Shia Islam, the waiting king who sleeps under mountains or behind veils, waiting to rise when the world is ready. What unites these stories isn't politics. It is the longing, a deep need to believe that wisdom, justice, and order cannot die with flesh. That some truths are too sacred to disappear. Because when chaos arises and leaders fall, we look back, not only for comfort, but for continuity. And sometimes we whisper that they never really left. In the following belief, we explore those who never needed crowns or thrones to embody beings from another world, blurring the border between the animal and the spirit, and between the beast and the god. Hybrid spirits between animals and humans. In the ancient imagination, the border between human beings and beasts was not fixed. It breathed, change blurred. And in that liminal space, where the claw meets the hand, where the fong meets the voice, something feared and revered at the same time arose. The hybrid spirit between animal and human. These beings appear in all cultures, throughout centuries, partly animal, partly human, and totally different. In some stories, they protect. In others, they punish. They always remind us of what is hidden under our skin. In North American indigenous traditions, there are beings that change shape and adopt the appearance of wolves, bears, or birds, spiritual beings linked to the earth, to the ancestors, and to the rituals. Sometimes they're tricksters. Sometimes they are guides. Sometimes they are your own ancestors with another face. In ancient Egypt, gods walked the earth with human bodies and animal heads. Anubis, guide of the afterlife with the head of a jackal. Horus, protector with the eyes of a falcon. They were not mere costumes. They were essence made visible. The flesh was mixed with symbolic power. In Hinduism, gods like Ganesha, with an elephant's head, and Narasimha, half man, half lion, represent a divine intervention. The animal aspects are not mere decoration. They are archetypes: courage, wisdom, memory, and strength turned into flesh. Even in Greek mythology, minotaurs, centaurs, and satyrs blur human civility with instinct, anger, or lust. In the Chinese tradition, the Huli Jing fox spirits can appear as seductive women or mischievous animals, revealing the changing nature of desire and identity. But not all hybrid spirits are divine. Some are warnings. The werewolf, the skinwalker, the tiger man of Malaysian folklore. These creatures embody the fear that something wild lives within us, something that one day might emerge. In dreams, it is said that hybrids between animals and humans symbolize an inner conflict. The rational versus the instinctive, the social self versus the primal impulse. You are talking, but you're growling. You are praying, but you're hunting. Modern psychology might call them projections, manifestations of repressed emotions, or fractured identities. But ancient traditions see them differently. They are not symptoms. They are truths that we've tried to forget. In shamanic journeys, merging with animal forms was not hallucination. It was a revelation. Seeing yourself with wings or claws was remembering what your underlanguages mask. And sometimes what you saw was too sincere to bear. Because seeing the beast in yourself is admitting that civilization is a thin, temporary, and easily broken skin. And in the following belief, that skin is not only thin, it is already rotting, not metaphorically nor spiritually, but quite literally for those who suffer it. Cotard syndrome, the syndrome of the living dead. Imagine that you wake up one morning and you are absolutely sure of something unbreakable, inexplicable, and terrifying, that you're dead. Not dying, not being broken metaphorically, but truly and irrevocably dead. Your heart keeps beating, your breath is still warm, but you no longer believe that your organs still work. You may even believe that your blood has faded, that your entrails have rotted, or that your soul has already left your body. This is Cotard's syndrome, named after the 19th century French neurologist Jules Cotard, who described patients convinced that they were corpses. Some believed they had no brain. Others said they were doomed. A few insisted that they could no longer die because they had already died. In its most severe form, Cotard's syndrome separates identity from biology. It turns the body into a haunted house. Your extremities move, but feel like puppets. Your voice resonates deeply, strange and distant. The mirrors reflect a stranger now. Hunger disappears entirely. Pleasure dissolves away. Nothing matters because nothing lives. It often arises from deep depression or psychotic outbreaks as a result. From a neurological point of view, it has been related to damage in the parietal and frontal lobes, regions responsible for integrating physical and emotional awareness. But knowing biology does not lessen the horror, because it is not about fearing death. It is the conviction that death already occurred, and now you're a ghost trapped in flesh. Some patients stop eating, not from sadness, but logic. Why feed a corpse then? Others visit morgues or cemeteries, convinced they belong in those places. Some have even asked to be buried. In exceptional cases, people with Cotard syndrome may experience a grotesque immortality. They believe they cannot die because they crossed the threshold already. Time no longer exists here. The laws of physics seem so distant. Everything becomes empty now. It is more than illusion. It is existential disintegration itself. Philosophers could see Cotard's as a twisted mirror of solipsism, except that here the self is not the only thing existing. The self is what exists no longer. In this mentality, even nihilism feels full. And yet, something feels disturbingly familiar. How often do we go through life disconnected? We spend the hours like ghosts, we float in relationships like echoes, we forget what it feels like to be fully in a body. Cotards may be rare, but absence is common. We fear death, but sometimes what we fear most is the slow and silent belief that perhaps we have already crossed the line and no one has noticed. And in the following belief, that internal silence may not be a symptom at all, but the way mind worked before consciousness existed as we know it. The bicameral mind theory. What if consciousness, your inner voice, your sense of self, did not always exist? Not only in animals, not only in machines, but also in human beings. What if for much of history, people did not think but obeyed instead? This is the chilling proposal of psychologist Julian James and his controversial theory of the bicameral mind. According to James, early humans were not aware as we are now. They did not introspect much. They did not reason about their decisions. They heard voices, real voices. Voices they believed came from the gods themselves. James argued that the human brain, especially the two hemispheres, functioned differently then. The left hemisphere, for language and action, received orders from the right, which generated hallucinatory voices during stress or decision-making. Those orders were experienced as divine, not just metaphorically. Literally, Homer's Iliad gods do not advise or inspire. They speak directly. They order people. Achilles does not debate his decisions much. He hears Athenia in his ear. Agamemnon does not debate guilt or remorse. He receives a dream sent by Zeus. There is no interior monologue, nor search for self. James believed that this system of internal guidance was at one time the norm, that the ancient temples were not places of worship. They were control centers where kings, priests, and oracles mediated divine voices that governed daily life. But something changed. Around the year 1200 A.C., the societies collapsed, cities burned, literacy spread, and the voices, those gods that gave orders, fell silent. Chaos occurred. People had to start making decisions without divine instruction. And in that void, something new emerged. Consciousness. The ability to think about thought, to question, to doubt, to narrate one's life. James believed that consciousness, as we know, it is only a few thousand years old, that it had to be invented like writing like wheels, a cultural, not biological evolution. Modern neuroscience does not fully support James' theory, but it does not completely rule it out either. Brain scans show that auditory hallucinations in schizophrenia or religious experiences activate pathways similar to those proposed in bicameral processing. And even today, in moments of extreme stress or trauma, people sometimes hear voices, feel that they are ordered to do things, act without thinking, as if the mind under pressure returns to an older model. This raises a terrifying question. What if your sense of self is not truth, but habit? What if the gods never disappeared? They only moved inside. And in the next belief, you may discover that the world around you has already changed slightly. Enough to realize, enough to wonder, enough to make you question if the story happened as you remember it. The Mandela effect. You remember something clearly, vividly, without doubt. A name, a logo, a moment in history. You could swear it happened that way. But then you check, and it's not like that. You're not alone. Thousands of people remember that Nelson Mandela died in prison in the 1980s. They remember the funeral, the global mourning, the headlines. But he lived until 2013. The inconsistency was so widespread that the phenomenon was given a name, the Mandela effect. And it doesn't end there. Did the Monopoly man wear a monocle? No. Did Pikachu have a black tip on his tail? No. Is Luke, I am your father. That phrase never existed. Entire crowds remember movies, books, or product names that never existed. They remember another version of reality. Some blame, faulty memory, our brain that fills in the gaps and rewrites the past to fit expectations. We remember wrong. They say we confabulate. But the volume and consistency of these mismatches begin to seem coordinated, like echoes of a different world. That's where the theory shifts. Some believe that the Mandela effect is proof of alternative timelines, that our reality has split, been altered, or merged. That what you remember is not incorrect. It is from another branch. A universe where Mandela died in prison, where the Monopoly man wore a monocle, where Freeze had two E's, and somehow it escaped you or everything else escaped you. Others relate it to simulation theory. If we live in simulated reality, these inconsistencies could be side effects of code rewrites, patches made to our environment without completely erasing the old files, like residual fragments of an earlier version that are filtered. Some even go further. They suggest these changes are intentional, that someone or something is editing reality, not memory, reality itself, one detail at a time. The strangest thing is that once you see one, you start seeing more. You start to question not only the facts, but the points of reference, the things you were sure about. And when enough changes, the world itself begins to seem unstable, as if the ground under your feet were made of fog. You check twice. You ask others, and sometimes they remember it like you do, sometimes not, and you are left wondering which one is real. The Mandela effect is not about trivialities. It is about trust in memory, in consensus, in the fabric of your life. Because if so many people can remember something that never happened, what other things could we believe together that were never real? And in the next belief, maybe you won't be the one who has changed the timelines. Someone else may have taken your place. The wandering soul theory. One day, you wake up different. Not only in mood, not only in your memories, but in essence, something has changed. The way you speak seems strange to yourself. Your way of seeing the world has changed. You remember your past, but you don't feel it as your own. And your loved ones also perceive it. They say that you have changed, that there is something in your eyes that is no longer familiar. According to the soul-entering theory, that feeling isn't a crisis. It is a replacement. This metaphysical belief suggests that sometimes a soul leaves a living body and another, completely different soul enters to take its place. The body stays the same. The memories may remain, but the driver behind the eyes has changed. It is not possession. It is not reincarnation. It is a cosmic agreement. The original soul, perhaps overwhelmed or has completed its path, leaves, and a new soul, eager to fulfill a mission, enters an already developed body to skip the pains of childhood and accelerate its work in the world. This is not a fringe belief. It appears in many spiritual and esoteric traditions. Some New Age teachings describe walk-ins as advanced souls who enter in times of trauma, illness, or near death, when the body is vulnerable and the departing soul is ready to surrender. Shamans have spoken of this as a sacred exchange, a barter negotiated on a spiritual plane beyond our understanding. The signs, sudden changes in personality, a radical change in beliefs or values, abilities that seem to appear overnight, a powerful sense of purpose that arises out of nowhere, and often a strange emotional distance from the previous life. Friends notice it first, then family, and then the person themselves begins to wonder, why don't the things that used to break me hurt anymore? Why do my desires seem borrowed? Why does the face I see in the mirror look like me, but not quite? Skeptics call it a defense mechanism, an elaborate story that the mind tells to escape pain, to justify personal reinvention. But even if that's true, what does it mean when the story becomes indistinguishable from reality? Some believe that walk-ins are here to change the world, that they arrive in times of great change to influence culture, science, or spirituality. They do not remember where they come from, but they know why they're here. And sometimes they fight because being in a borrowed body isn't easy. The past clings, the memories resonate, and not everyone around them is ready to let go of the person who left. Whether metaphor or metaphysics, the theory of walk-ins raises a deeper question. Are you the same person you were 5 or 10 years ago? Or did someone or something else take control when you weren't looking? And in this belief, what stares at you may not be your past self or any self at all. It may be a trap, a reflection waiting to take more than your image. Mirrors that steal souls. You have seen it in stories. Perhaps you have even whispered it as a warning to children. Do not look too long in the mirror. Do not look at it in the dark. Do not say your name 3 times. But under the folklore hides something older, deeper, and more chilling. An ancient belief that mirrors not only reflect you, but consume you. In countless cultures throughout time, mirrors have not been considered neutral objects, but portals, thresholds, or traps. In some traditions, looking in a mirror is inviting something invisible to look back, and if you are not careful, to take something from you. In Slavic superstition, mirrors are covered when someone dies. Not out of pain, but for protection. It is believed that the soul of the dead can be trapped in the glass, unable to move on. In some Chinese traditions, mirrors are removed from the room where the deceased lies, so their soul does not become confused or attracted to the reflection. In some parts of Africa, it is said that mirrors can harbor spirits and that the more you look at them, the more parts of yourself you leave behind. In Victorian England, mirrors were covered during mourning for fear that the soul of the afflicted or the ghost of the deceased would sneak into them. And in the shamanic tradition of all continents, mirrors are not considered tools of vanity, but of vision to divine the future, invoke the dead, or cross to the other side. But the practitioner must always be careful, because not everything that enters the mirror comes back out. The fear is not only that mirrors reveal too much. It is that they might not just reflect, they might remember. Modern science explains the fear of mirrors as a trick by the brain. Staring at your reflection for too long, especially in low light, can cause facial features to become distorted, expressions to change, and hallucinations appear. It is called strange face illusion, a flaw in the facial recognition circuit. But the experience is deeply personal, almost spiritual. There are people who claim that their reflection smiles when they're not blinking, or that, suddenly, they feel as if something else is looking at them through their own eyes. Children are often the first ones to perceive it. It is not necessary to teach them to feel uncomfortable in front of a mirror in the dark. They simply know it. In some legends, a broken mirror steals a soul. In others, it only steals a fragment each time you look at it, until it slowly empties you. And when you have given enough of yourself, the mirror can show you what is left, or, worse, who has taken your place. Because not all reflections are copies. Some are invitations. And in this belief, the soul is not only stolen. It returns as something small, fragile, and easy to step on without thinking twice. Reincarnation as insects. What if you came back, but not as a person, or as a noble warrior, or as a lover or artist, but as something small, something that crawls, something that is crushed without a second thought? In many belief systems, reincarnation is a wheel, a cycle, life, death, rebirth, one turn after another until the soul is purified or punished. But not all reincarnations are human. Some are humiliating, others horrible. In the Hindu and Buddhist cosmologies, being reborn as an insect isn't only possible. It is a warning. A soul burdened with ignorance, selfishness, or violence can descend the ladder of rebirth, from human to animal, from animal to insect, a fly buzzing in the dirt, a worm writhing in the earth, a mosquito that dies from one blow. In the tradition of Jain, even the smallest organisms are sacred. Killing an insect is a karmic act because that insect could have been a king, a mother, a monk, and your soul could easily follow the same downward spiral. But this belief is not limited to the East. In some parts of Occidental Africa, it is believed that spirits sometimes return in the form of insects to visit the living. A moth in particular appears after a death. A cricket that remains in the room where someone is mourning. Killing it silences a message. In Celtic folklore, butterflies were considered souls in transit. In Mexico, it was believed that the monarch butterfly transported the spirits of the dead and returned each year in a gentle, whispering swarm. Beautiful, ephemeral, and easily swept away by the wind. What is disturbing is not transformation. It is the fragility. Believing that you could return as a beetle is facing how fragile the thread of identity really is. How quickly it can break. How silent your next form could be. And yet, for some, it is comforting that nothing is wasted, that even a mosquito has memory, that a dying whisper may one day return with wings or antennae, landing invisibly on a windowsill. But for others, the idea is unbearable. Spending a whole life learning, fighting, crying, and returning as something that crawls between rot, something too low to be feared. It suggests that dignity is not guaranteed, that evolution is not a straight line. And it raises the question, what if your soul keeps paying for something it cannot remember? The next time you kill a fly, think about this. It may have once been someone who thought their story was over. Someone who prayed to be free, to be forgiven, to be reborn, and now their entire existence ends with a spasm under your palm. But in the following belief, death does not wait for the body to return. It sends a message in advance, slipping into your dreams, whispering what is to come. Dreams that predict death. You wake up in the middle of the night with your heart pounding. You have seen someone die, not in a nightmare, nor in the midst of chaos, but in stillness, in silence, as if the world whispered something it should not say. Then it happens. The person you dreamed of dies. Maybe not immediately, maybe not in the same way, but similar enough to stop calling it a coincidence. Cultures around the world have long believed in precognitive dreams, visions that foreshadow death before it arrives. They are not symbolic or metaphorical, but literal visions of endings yet to be revealed. In ancient Rome, dreams were considered messages from the underworld. The dead spoke through them, offering warnings, requests, or signs. In Egypt, dream books listed specific symbols that were said to predict an imminent death. A collapsed house, a bird with broken wings, a darkened mirror. Among the Zulus of South Africa, it is said that ancestors send dreams to alert the living to danger. A coffin, a snake, a shadow at the foot of the bed. They are not dreams. They are visits. In Filipinas, dreaming that your teeth fall out means that someone close is going to die. In Appalachian folklore, dreaming of a white horse is a sign of a funeral. In modern Japan, it is not uncommon for someone to inform their relatives of a premonitory dream, just in case. Science explains it differently. We are sensitive to signs, subtle behaviors, deteriorating health, changes in tone, and the subconscious puts them together in the form of a narrative while we sleep. It is not prophecy, it is pattern recognition. But sometimes there is no pattern. A child dreams of an airplane accident, and the next day, a distant cousin dies in one. A woman sees her father saying goodbye in a dream and discovers that he died during the night. A man hears a knock at the door, opens it in a dream, and sees no one. In the morning, he learns that his best friend died at that same time. The rational mind hurries to explain it. Coincidence, probability, retroactivity, but the emotional weight is undeniable. It feels as if something was known before knowing it was possible. Some believe that death has a gravitational force not only on the body, but also on time. That the moment of death sends a wave backward. That our dreams are sensitive not only to what is coming, but to what has already begun. Others think that the dying themselves send the signal. That in their last moments they cross that increasingly thin veil to say farewell. Not with words, but with their presence, with their image, with a type of silence that only dreams hold. And the most disturbing thought of all is that you will not know which dreams are real until it's too late, until the message becomes memory, until the image becomes absence. Because in the following belief, it is not the dreams that are feared, but the hands, specifically the wrong one. The fear of being left-handed. For most of human history, being left-handed was not only an inconvenience. It was suspicious, dangerous, even demonic sometimes. The fear was deeply rooted in all languages, cultures, and centuries. The word left has long had a negative connotation. In Latin, sinistra means left and has also given us the word sinister. In French, gauche means left but also clumsy. In English, receiving a compliment with the left hand is like being insulted with a smile. It was not only semantics. In some places, left-handers were beaten or re-educated, forced to write with their right hand, punished for using the wrong one to eat, greet, or gesticulate. In many Islamic and Hindu traditions, the left hand is considered impure, reserved for bodily functions, never for sacred acts. Giving or receiving with it was an offense. Even in Christian theology, the division is marked. The righteous sit at the right hand of God, the condemned at his left. In medieval paintings, demons often extend their left hand. Witches stir their cauldrons counterclockwise. Evil moves backward. Why this obsession? Why this fear? In part, it is a statistical question. Left-handedness has always been a minority trait, present in around 10% of the population. And in antiquity, everything that was rare was venerated or reviled. In part, it is for practical reasons. In battle formations, it was easier to coordinate right-handers. When writing, most alphabets flow from left to right, which complicates things for left-handers. Cultural systems were built around the right hand, and deviation became deviation. But beneath those reasons hides something more ancient. The fear of asymmetry, of inversion, of what is not conformed to the norm. Left-handedness became a symbol of the marginal, the unpredictable, the strange. The child who reached for something with the wrong hand was not only a nuisance. They were marked. Some folklore traditions went further. It was said that left-handers had a sixth sense, that they dreamed more intensely, and that they spoke with spirits. Some cultures related the left hand to lunar energy, femininity, or chaos. Others whispered that left-handed people were more prone to being sorcerers, thieves, or shapeshifters. Even today, prejudice persists. Desks, tools, and musical instruments are designed for right-handers. In popular culture, left-handedness continues to be associated with creativity, rebellion, and even genius, but also with madness, criminality, and possession. Because the left hand not only writes differently, but gestures differently too. It moves against the grain. It reminds us that the body is not symmetrical, that not all human beings are mirror copies, and that what we fear most usually begins with what we do not understand. And in the following belief, that misunderstanding takes shape, not in the hands, but in melodies. Songs that not only remain in your head, but in your soul. Possession through music. You are alone, but the music fills the room like a presence. It accumulates. It pulses. And suddenly, you're no longer listening. You are changing. Throughout history, music has been more than sound. It has been spirit, a force that eludes reason, pierces the skin, and touches something ancient within us. And in many traditions, that force not only moves you, but goes into you. In Haitian voodoo, possession is not a curse, it is a ritual. The drums call the spirits, and these respond by entering the dancers' bodies. Each rhythm belongs to a different deity. The music not only summons, it indicates who is going to arrive. A trembling foot, an eye that turns, a collapse, and the human being becomes a vessel. In the traditions of West Africa, the talking drum speaks the language of gods. Certain rhythms are not only heard, they are obeyed. They change breathing, posture, and voice. The listener becomes a bridge between worlds. In the Middle East, the Sufi sema, the whirling ceremony, is accompanied by chants and instruments designed to induce the whole, a state of spiritual ecstasy. But sometimes it is said that the dancer disappears completely, overcome by divine presence. In Pentecostal Christian churches, the Holy Spirit does not descend through silence, but through song. The faithful shake, shout, and speak in tongues. The music rises, and something enters. Joy, light, or something darker if you're not careful. The Greeks had a name for it. In theos, being filled with divine music was the path chosen by Dionysus, the god of ecstasy, madness, and transformation. His rites dissolved identity. The dancers forgot themselves, and something else took their place. Modern psychology calls it dissociation, a state of trance. But those who have felt it know that it is more than that. There's a moment just before you get lost in which something else comes into play. Possession through music is not always welcome. In some cultures, it is believed that cursed songs attract spirits. Flutes that cannot be stopped. Chants that open doors. A melody that you hum once and you cannot forget because it is not yours. There are urban legends about pop songs that drive people crazy. It is rumored that in the opera areas that, according to rumors, evoke ghosts, stories of rock musicians who claim to be conduits of something beyond talent. And then there's the subtle form, the song that changes your mood, that makes you cry for no reason, that makes you feel seen or harassed. Not all spirits scream upon entry. Some simply settle in. After all, music is among the oldest forms of contact. A code, ritual a key, and depending on what, when, and how you play, you may not be the only one who hears. Because in the following belief, the line between spirit and illness becomes harder to draw. What if losing your mind isn't madness? What if it's something sacred? A sacred madness. In most of the modern world, madness is feared. It is treated, labeled, and contained. But there was a time, and in some places still is, when madness wasn't a diagnosis. It was a door. Throughout cultures and centuries, individuals who broke with reality were not always rejected. They were venerated, touched by gods, chosen by spirits, marked by something reason alone could never understand. In ancient Greece, mania wasn't always a pathology. It was divine fury. The Oracle of Delphi sat on an abyss, exhaling vapors, pronouncing riddles and visions. Her words were fragmented, frenetic, yet sacred. Apollo did not whisper in her mind. He dominated it. In many indigenous cultures, mental disorders are not immediately treated as illness, but examined as initiation. A soul in crisis may experience a call. After all, the shaman often breaks first. They hear what others cannot hear. They see what others do not want to see, not because they are broken, but because they are being rebuilt by something bigger. In Islamic mysticism, Majasub refers to those who seem crazy, but are said to be drunk on divine presence. In Hinduism, the Avada is a spiritually liberated being who can act in ways society considers irrational, naked, wandering, unpredictable. But for initiates, they have transcended illusion. In West Africa, spirits speak via seizures. In Haiti, the most disadvantaged ride people like horses and make them laugh, dance, and fall. The possessed body can scream, writhe, confess, but it is sacred, not sick. And even in Christianity, saints and visionaries often teetered on the edge of what today would be diagnosed as psychosis. Joan of Arc heard voices. Hildegard von Bingen saw lights and creatures that no one else could see. Were they crazy or messengers? The modern world fears what it can't categorize. We sedate the ecstatic, restrained visionaries. But what if some madness is messages? What if the mind does not break because it is failing, but because it is receiving something too big for it to contain? Of course, not all suffering sacred. Many who suffer from mental illness do so without myths, ceremonies, or transformation. The pain is real. The confusion is real. But so is the possibility that what we call madness is sometimes a different clarity, a break from the ordinary to make room for extraordinary. Because what is madness but the refusal to see things as others do? And what is prophecy but madness that the world has learned to venerate? In the following belief, this rupture doesn't only occur in the mind. It opens in the world itself. And some say it leads straight down. The hollow earth theory. And what if everything we know about the ground we walk on was false? Not just a little, not just a few ancient tunnels or hidden chambers, but fundamentally wrong from a cosmic point of view. What if the earth was not solid in its entirety, but hollow? And inside that vast void, there existed a second world? The theory of the hollow earth has roamed the limits of science, myth, and conspiracy for centuries. It suggests that beneath our feet hides a hidden civilization, a sunless Eden, or perhaps something much stranger. The idea has deep roots. In the ancient Tibetan legends, there is Agartha, a hidden kingdom inside the earth that can be accessed only by the sacred initiates. It is said that its people are wise, peaceful, and technologically advanced, and that they live in harmony with the planet's energies. In Norse mythology, the kingdom of Svartheim, home to dwarves and deep spirits of the earth, is located under the surface. In Buddhist cosmology, there are underground worlds located below ours, each populated by beings invisible to surface inhabitants. The modern version took shape in the 17th century, when Edmund Halley, the astronomer who gave us Halley's Comet, suggested that the Earth could be composed of concentric spheres, each rotating independently and possibly harboring life. He was not kidding. He thought that could explain the strange compass readings. In the 19th century, the American explorer John Cleves Sims Jr. proposed the existence of enormous holes in the North and South poles that led to the hollow interior. He requested that Congress finance an expedition. He died before it could be carried out. But the belief did not die with him. Some said that the Nazis escaped to the hollow Earth after the Second World War. Others claim that UFOs do not come from space, but from within, that the sky is not our only frontier. In many versions, the inner world is utopian, free of wars, pollution, and decadence. In others, it is dystopian, a prison of ancient creatures, lost civilizations, or beings that remember when they ruled the surface. Science, of course, does not agree. Seismic readings, volcanic activity, and gravitational measurements show a solid Earth with a molten core. But the hollow Earth persists, not because of the evidence, but because of instinct. We look at caves and marvel. We see sinkholes and imagine doors. We excavate and discover ruins that no one remembers building. There is something in us that believes that the truth might not be up but down. And psychologically, it makes sense. We bury the things we do not want to face. We repress. We dig graves. We hide shame. Perhaps the hollow Earth is not a theory at all. Perhaps it is a metaphor for the hidden self, vast, unknown, and full of secrets. And in the following belief, the Earth is not hollow at all. It is solid, balanced, and stands impossibly on the shell of a turtle. The Earth balanced on a giant turtle. In a world in which science insists on orbits, gravity, and the cold dance of celestial mechanics, an older, warmer, stranger, and infinitely more alive image persists. The Earth, not suspended in space, but resting gently on the shell of a giant turtle. This belief appears in cultures separated by oceans and centuries. In Hindu, Chinese, and in various indigenous American mythologies, the world is not a rock adrift in the void. It is a living, balanced, sustained, transported platform. In Hindu cosmology, the cosmic turtle corm emerges during the churning of the ocean of milk. It carries Mount Mandara on its back. While the gods and demons participate in the process, they twist the Vasuki serpent around the mountain to create the nectar of immortality. The turtle becomes stability amid chaos, a stabilizing force between the realms. In Chinese mythology, the giant turtle holds up the skies. Its legs were cut to be the four pillars of the earth. In some versions, its shell is the map of the world, curved, detailed, complete. And in many North American indigenous traditions, most famously among the Lapi and the Iroquois, the earth was formed on a great turtle's shell after Skywoman fell from the sky. The animals submerged in the waters to bring earth from the depths, placing it on the turtle's shell to create the earth. That earth is still known in stories and ceremonies as Turtle Island. What makes these stories endure is not only the imaginary, but intimacy. The earth is not something separate or indifferent. It breathes. It supports weight. It moves slowly, deliberately, like time itself, and it can be wounded. In some versions, the turtle gets tired. In others, it moves slightly, causing earthquakes or changes of season. The stability of the world is always contingent, never permanent, always alive. Skeptics dismiss the turtle myth as a primitive cosmology, a poetic misunderstanding. But that vision does not hit nail on the head. These stories do not describe the world as it is. They describe how it feels. That something ancient sustains us. That balance must be kept. That life depends on the grace of something deeper, older, and slower than we imagine. And perhaps the most shocking thing is that Earth is not alone. The turtle sustains us. Yes, but who sustains the turtle? In some stories, it rests on another turtle. And that turtle rests on another. And below that one, more turtles to infinity. This infinite pile is not only absurd, it is sublime. It recognizes the mystery without demanding an end, without insisting that we solve it. Some truths that it suggests are not destined to be reached. They are destined to be transported. And in the following belief, it is not a turtle that sustains us, but an egg, a vast sacred shell waiting to break. The universe as cosmic egg. Before the stars existed, before atoms existed, before time had a name or direction, the egg existed. Not laid, not incubated, not broken accidentally. The cosmic egg appears in the ancient belief systems in almost every corner of the world. It is not a metaphor. It is the origin, a perfect and silent orb that floats in the void and contains all matter, all spirit, all potential. The first uterus, the first world. In Hindu mythology, it is called Hiranya-garbha, the golden uterus, a radiant egg that floats in the darkness and contains Brahma, the creator. When it broke, the heavens and the earth were born. The upper shell became the sky, the lower one the earth, the yolk, everything else. In the Greek Orphic tradition, the first being, fans, emerged from a silver egg wrapped in serpent spirals, bringing light, movement, and the cosmos into existence. The egg was autonomous, but once broken, it gave rise to duality, light and darkness, the masculine and the feminine, life and death. In China, Pangu slept inside a cosmic egg for 18,000 years. When he woke, he broke it with a breath. The clear parts rose to form the sky. The heavy ones sank to become the earth, and Pangu stood between them, keeping them separate while the world matured. The dogs of Mali speak of an egg from which the god Amma created the universe through vibration and rhythm. In Finnish mythology, the world was born from a duck's egg that broke on the knee of the sky. All versions tell the same truth differently. Before complexity, there was contention, totality, unity waiting to divide. Modern science has its own version, the singularity before the Big Bang, a point of infinite density, silent, undivided, that contains all the galaxies, stars, and thoughts that will ever exist. An egg by another name. But there is something deeper to this symbolism. Eggs are not static things. They exist in time. They contain something alive, something waiting. They suggest not only birth, but pressure, fragility, the feeling that something moves under the shell. Perhaps the universe was never meant to explode. Perhaps it already did, and perhaps it will again. Because in some traditions, the egg is not a unique event. It's a cycle. Worlds are born, die, and the shell reforms again and again. Eternity curves inward and outward like breath, like thought, like time itself. Which leads us to this belief. What if time isn't a line? What if it's a spiral? Time is spiral. We are taught to see time as a straight line, a perfect arrow. The past behind us, the future ahead, always moving onward. But what if that's a comforting illusion? What if time does not extend? It rolls up tightly. In many ancient and esoteric traditions, time is not linear. It turns around itself. It turns in circles now, but not in perfect circles. Rather like a spiral, a pattern that repeats, but never quite the same. Familiar, yet altered. A rhythm, not a route. The Mayans understood this. Their long count calendar does not measure time as infinite progress, but overlapping cycles of birth, collapse, and rebirth. Epochs that arise, fall, then rise. Each one repeats the previous with disturbing precision. In Hinduism, the universe moves through repetitive yugas, vast cosmic eras that spiral through creation and decay. The golden age is never permanent, nor the dark one. Everything that comes will return, though not identically. Modern physics also flirts with that idea. Certain cosmological models suggest the universe may oscillate, expanding and collapsing in an infinite succession, a spiral ritual through eternity. Even string theory imagines dimensions that roll up on themselves, like musical scales returning to the same note an octave higher. And in psychology, we see something similar. How the same challenges reappear in our lives, dressed in new suits. How healing is often not linear, but circular. You think you have overcome something, only to find yourself face to face with it again. Deeper now, older, changed. Because maybe time isn't a path. Maybe it's just a rhythm. A spiral staircase winding through memory, myth, and meaning. Each step forward revisits one step back. You're not still. You are orbiting. We feel it in the déjà vu, in seasonal mood states, in ancestral traumas that resurge generations later. The past does not stay buried. It reappears, asking if we are prepared to understand it differently. And if time truly turns in a spiral, then we are not running toward a definitive end. We move inwards or outwards, tracing the same curves with a new perspective, closer to something that we have always known but never fully understood. In the following belief, this spiral becomes sharper, less abstract, and more relentless. Because what if each moment you live is one that you have already lived and will relive? The eternal return. Imagine living this exact life, not once nor twice, but infinite times. Each breath, each choice, each regret, again and again. In every detail, up to the blink, the cough, the way sunlight enters through the window at 3:17 p.m. of a Tuesday that you have already lived countless times. This is the terrifying and overwhelming idea that underlies eternal return. It is mostly associated with Friedrich Nietzsche, although echoes of it are found in ancient philosophy, Hindu cosmology, and even modern physics. Nietzsche posed it as a mental experiment. He asked, if a demon whispered to you that this life that you now live you will have to live once more and countless times more, would you fall desperate to the ground, or would you get up willing to live it more fully than ever? Would you collapse on the ground desperate, or would you get up willing to live it more fully than ever? It is not only about repetition. It is about the consequences. Because if each action that you perform must resonate through eternity, repeating itself not once, but forever, then each moment becomes sacred, immutable, engraved on the stone of time. In Hinduism, a similar idea is developed through the infinite cycle of samsara, birth, death, and rebirth, a wheel that turns until liberation is reached. But what if there's no liberation? What if the wheel does not break? What if there is no way out? Science offers a strange parallel. In a universe of infinite size and finite configurations, it is mathematically possible that your life repeats, not as reincarnation, nor as a metaphor, but as recurrence, a cosmic failure, a statistical inevitability. You again in some distant or not so distant place. But the true weight of the eternal recurrence is not in distant galaxies. It is in this moment, in this breath. If you knew that you would return forever, would you treat it differently? Nietzsche did not intend it as comfort. He intended it as a test. Could you say yes to your life? Not only to joy, but also to boredom, to heartbreak, to suffering. If you had to live it endlessly, without being able to edit or escape it. And if you could not, what would you change? Because eternity is not always golden. It can also be a trap, an endless mirror, a loop that narrows until meaning itself starts to fray. And in the following belief, that trap might not be philosophical at all. It could be historical, because what if the past you believe you live in was invented? The phantom time hypothesis. You believe that it is the year 2025, that more than 2,000 years have passed since the birth of Christ, that history flows behind us like a documented river. But what if everything is false? What if it's not 2025? What if it is the 18th century? What if 3 entire centuries of history, kings, empires, wars never happened? This is the disturbing premise of the phantom time hypothesis, a fringe theory proposed by German historian Herbert Illig in the 1990s. It suggests that nearly 300 years of documented history, from approximately 614 to 911 AD, were invented, inserted, and then falsified. According to the hypothesis, the High Middle Ages, the so-called Dark Age, is a historical illusion. Documents were falsified, artifacts were wrongly dated, calendars were manipulated, and the motive was power. The main suspect of Illig, the emperor of the Holy Roman Germanic Empire Oton, together with Pope Sylvester II, supposedly rewrote time to place themselves as rulers during the sacred year 1 AD, a date of prophetic and symbolic importance. But they had a problem. The calendar did not match. So they created history to move the date forward. They invented Carlo Magno. They filled the gaps with wars, successions, and crusades. Then they retroactively legitimized it with falsified texts and reconstructed timelines. According to this point of view, a large part of European history, especially from the 7th to the 10th centuries, is not well documented. It is fictitious. Critics reject the idea outright. They point to dendrochronology, dating by tree rings, astronomical records, and global synchrony in historical texts. Surely someone somewhere would have noticed a 300-year error. But the theory remains seductive because it attacks something deeper than chronology. It asks, how much history do we accept without questioning? How many dates, battles, and emperors are real for us simply because we were told they were? What if rewriting history does not require conspiracy, but only consensus? We already know that history is written by the victors. But what if it is also selected by the forgetful, shaped by loss, eroded by time, and patched with convenient fictions? The phantom time hypothesis is not so much a literal claim as a psychological lens, a reminder that the past is fragile, that time, like memory, is manipulable. And if our foundations are false, what else could be a dream? Because in the following belief, that is exactly what life is. It is not a lie, nor a trick, but the dream of something unimaginably great that slowly awakens. Life as the dream of a giant. You wake up, stretch, and blink at the morning light, sure that this is reality. But what if you are wrong? What if everything around you, this world, its people, its rules, is nothing more than a flash in someone's mind? In Hindu philosophy, there is the concept of Vishnu's dream. Vishnu, the preserving god, lies asleep on the cosmic serpent Ananta, which floats in an infinite ocean. And as he sleeps, he dreams the universe until it comes to life. The galaxies unfold. Time begins. Life takes shape, all in the silent breath of a sleeping god. And when he wakes up, the world disappears. It does not die, it ceases, like a story that was never written. This is not unique to Hinduism. In the Chinese Taoist tradition, the philosopher Zhuangzi dreamed he was a butterfly. When he woke up, he could no longer say for sure if he had dreamed that he was a butterfly or if he was a butterfly dreaming. Identity, he suggests, is just a temporary mask worn by dreamers. The dream time of the Aborigines of Australia describes creation not as a singular event, but as a continuous state. The ancestors dreamed the world and shaped it, and that dream continues to resonate beneath our waking lives. A landscape of consciousness more real than anything we can touch. According to these views, dreaming is not a form of evasion. Perhaps its origin and wakefulness are the illusion. Even modern science is approaching this idea. Quantum theory tells us that the act of observing gives shape to what we call reality. That particles do not act like particles until observed. That the universe itself may be a probabilistic fog until someone or something collapses it, giving it shape. Then we ask, who or what is observing? Some say the dreamer is divine. Others say it is the collective unconscious. A few wonder if it is less benevolent. A god who forgets. A giant whose nap lasts for millennia. And in his dream, we love, cry, build cities, start wars. But what happens if he moves in sleep? And if déjà vu is when the dream fails? Or if the dreams themselves are messages, waves from the dreamer's deepest self that seep into our imaginary world? There is strange comfort in this. If all this is a dream, then suffering is temporary. Maybe death is just waking. Maybe we are not prisoners of flesh, but fragments of a greater sleeper who dreams with us. And in the following belief, the dream does not come from a giant or God. It comes from code and runs at this moment. Simulated reality. What if the world you know, the sky, your memories, even your thoughts, are not real, not in the philosophical sense, not a metaphor, but literally simulated, a program, a representation, an illusion so convincing that it does not seem like an illusion at all. In modern times, this idea took the form of the simulation hypothesis. The philosopher Nick Bostrom proposed that if any advanced civilization can run ancestor simulations, virtual worlds populated by conscious beings, then we are likely living in one now. Because, statistically, simulated minds would outnumber the biological. But this belief is not new. Plato's allegory of the cave imagined humans chained in darkness, mistaking shadows for truth. Reality, he warned, could be far from what is perceived. The Buddha taught that the world is Maya, an illusion arising from desire and ignorance. Hindu thinkers describe the universe as a divine beach unfolding in Brahman's mind. In Gnostic Christianity, the material world was seen as an imperfect simulation created by an inferior being, an imperfect craftsman. The true divine reality was hidden, veiled behind matter's bright surface. Even Descartes doubted perception's reliability. He imagined an evil demon manipulating his senses, creating a false reality. His only certainty was thought itself. I think, therefore I am, but even current thought could be a line of code. Our own technologies echo these ancient fears. Virtual reality, deepfakes, people generated by AI. They all blur the line between the real and fabricated. Who says the world you see out the window is not rendered in real time? That when you look away, it dissolves like a game that preserves no memory. Quantum physics does not help here. Some interpretations suggest particles do not take shape until observed. That the universe behaves like a simulation, calculating results only when needed. And dreams. Our oldest personal simulations seem real until we awaken. What if there is no awakening? The simulation hypothesis is not about just technology. It is about doubt itself. The growing suspicion that reality has seen that something observes that everything, from the beats of your heart to your childhood, could be part of script. But if we are in a simulation, then a deeper question arises. Who or what directs it, and also why? In the following belief, the question is not who observes, but who feels, because what if consciousness is not just a human gift? What if it belongs to everything? Panpsychism. Everything is conscious. Look around you. The chair you're sitting on, the screen in front of you, the air that gently touches your skin. You believe these things are an inert, mindless background. But what if they are not? What if everything, the stones, the wind, the stars, the atoms, possesses a hint of consciousness? This is the strange, ancient, and increasingly modern idea of panpsychism. The belief that consciousness is not an exceptional human trait, but a fundamental characteristic of the universe, which does not arise from complexity, nor is exclusive to the brain, but is integrated into reality itself. For most, this sounds absurd. Why would a rock be conscious? What could it think? But panpsychism does not claim that everything thinks like a human. It claims that everything experiences in its own way, at its own level. The inner world of a chair is not like yours, but it doesn't have to be empty either. This vision goes back to very ancient times. In many indigenous traditions, consciousness is not limited to people or animals. The mountains speak. The rivers remember. The earth, animism is felt. The soul in all things is not superstition. It is their survival, a way of living in harmony with a world that listens. In ancient Greece, philosophers like Thales and then Anaximander suspected that all matter was alive, that nothing purely dead or inert existed. Even Plato suggested that the cosmos itself was a single living being. Today, some physicists and philosophers are revisiting these old intuitions from a fresh perspective. They ask themselves, if consciousness arises from matter, what part of matter creates it? Neurons, molecules, or electrons? If we follow the trail far enough, we arrive at a strange conclusion. Either consciousness magically arises at some threshold, or it is there from the beginning in every quark, every wave, every spin. Panpsychism does not mean that everything is intelligent. It means that everything is just a flash, a glow, a shadow of consciousness, but enough to build, enough for the universe to know itself, not only through us, but through all of its parts. It is a disturbing idea. We have built our world on the premise that most of it is dead, that we can cut, extract, and dispose of it without consequences. What if we are wrong? What if the forest observes, the ocean dreams, the plastic bottle whispers? What does it mean that the universe not only contains consciousness, but is consciousness itself? In the following belief, consciousness may not have originated here. It could come from the stars. The ancient astronauts theory. They arrived before us. They are not gods, nor myths, nor metaphors. They are visitors. This is the essence of the ancient astronaut theory, a controversial belief that holds that intelligent extraterrestrial beings visited Earth in ancient times and shaped the history of humanity. That what we call deities were not divine, but technological, not supernatural, only advanced. It sounds like science fiction, but for some it is a hidden history. The defenders of this theory point to ancient structures that are too vast, too precise, too mysterious. The Great Pyramids of Giza, the Nazca lines engraved in the desert of Peru, the enormous stone platforms of Pumapunku in Bolivia. They asked themselves how the ancients could move stones of 100 tons without modern tools, align monuments with astronomical precision, or trace a map of the stars with amazing accuracy. They also point to ancient texts. The Vimanas of the Indian epics, flying chariots that wielded strange weapons. The rotating and shining wheels of the Book of Ezekiel. The Sumerian gods, known as the Anunnaki, who descended from the sky and gave civilization as a gift. Were these stories sacred myths or memories, distorted by time, of real encounters with non-human intelligences? The theory gained popularity during the 20th century, driven by writers like Erich von Däniken, whose book, Chariots of the Gods, asked if humanity's leap from cave dwellers to pyramid builders was too sudden to be natural. But the critics accuse him of cultural erasure. They argue that it dismisses the genius of ancient civilizations, replacing human ingenuity with alien intervention, and that it turns brilliant engineering into a mystery simply because we do not understand it. Even so, the charm persists, not only because it is exciting, but because it rethinks everything. If it were true, it would suggest that we are not the beginning. We are not alone, and we may not be in command. Perhaps our myths were not inventions, but interpretations. Primitive languages that struggled to describe metal and fire. Beings in suits mistaken for wings. Machines mistaken for miracles. Even now, rumors about UFO sightings and government revelations rekindle the question. If they came once, could they return, or have they never left? The ancient astronaut theory is not about little green men. It is about heritage, about asking ourselves if the stories we have buried in religion and architecture are trying to tell us something. That someone reached out to us a long time ago and left footprints in stone. And in the following belief, that connection between worlds is not established with rockets or spaceships. It is established in rituals, through movement, through memory, dancing with the dead. Dancing with the dead. In many cultures, the dead have not left. They remain, listen, and sometimes dance. For the Western mind, death is often silent, a whisper silence, a mourning wrapped in stillness. But around the world and throughout history, death has followed a different rhythm. It sings, plays the drum, sways in circles under the moonlight. From Madagascar to Mexico, from Bolivia to Bali, there are traditions in which the border between the living and the dead blurs. Not through spirit sessions or visions, but through celebration, movement, and dance. In the highlands of Madagascar, families practice the famahana, the turning of bones. Every few years they open the ancestral tombs, take out the wrapped remains of their dead, and dance with them. Literally, they lift the bodies, rewrap them in new cloths, play music, drink, and laugh. It's not macabre, it's reunion. In the Days of the Dead in Mexico, families welcome the souls of the dead who return home to visit them. Altars are built, offerings are made, music is played, and in the streets, people dance with their faces painted with skulls, not to mourn death, but to mock it to remind it that love does not forget. At the Fiesta de las Citas in Bolivia, people carry human skulls, sometimes inherited from generation to generation, to public squares and decorate them with hats, flowers, and sunglasses. They play music. They share coca leaves. They dance. The skulls are not morbid. They are sacred protectors, listeners. In some indigenous Philippine traditions, funerals include music and movements designed not to say goodbye, but to safely accompany the soul to the other side, to guide it with rhythm. These are not isolated rituals. They are echoes. They speak of a human instinct older than language. That movement unites worlds. Dancing is inviting, remembering, embodying pain not as paralysis, but as rhythm. Modern psychology hints at why this is important. Pain stored in the body can become disease. But pain expressed through rituals, through drums, hips, and bare feet on the earth can be transformed. It is not about forgetting the dead. It is about following their rhythm. In these dances, the dead are not the past. They are companions. Perhaps the body knows what the mind resists accepting, that the soul does not leave like a flame that goes out. It remains like a song, and to dance is to sing it so it exists again. And in the following belief, the dead are not only remembered, but are equipped, loaded with tools, memories, and treasures for a trip beyond the veil. Buried with provisions for the afterlife. You can't take it with you, or that's what they tell us. But throughout cultures and millennia, people have tried. They have equipped the dead, not for immobility, but for a journey. Not for the tomb, but for what lies beyond. In ancient Egypt, the pharaohs were buried with food, gold, boats, weapons, servants, sometimes alive. Their tombs were not crypts. They were launch pads, maps of eternity painted on the walls, instructions written in the stars. The soul would need guidance, defense, and wealth in the afterlife, just as in this one. In China, the emperors of the Han Dynasty were buried with thousands of clay figurines. Servants, guards, dancers, and miniature horses. The famous terracotta army stands as a stone legion to protect and accompany the dead in the afterlife. But even commoners were dismissed with paper JS folded in the form of money, which was burned as currency for the kingdom of spirits. In the Viking traditions, warriors were buried in boats or vessels, surrounded by tools, weapons, and even sacrificed animals or slaves. The fire sent them to Valhalla, armed and provided. The sea was not just water. It was a passage. In many Native American cultures, funerary objects were essential. Beads, food, weapons, and personal objects. They were not trinkets. They were provisions. A declaration of love and belief that the journey does not end, that it only changes course. Even today, there are echoes. Flowers on the tombs, notes tucked into coffins, personal objects placed next to the urns. We act as if we're saying goodbye to someone, not sealing their destiny. And maybe it is so. The impulse is not only material, but emotional. We imagine the dead not as absent, but in transit. And what kind of person dismisses a traveler with empty hands? Psychologically, these practices offer comfort. Rituals help the living to free themselves, but they also suggest something deep, that deep down we do not believe in endings. We believe in thresholds. And these offerings, coins in the eyes, food in the hand, amulets on the chest, are our way of saying, we do not know what will come next, but we want you to be prepared. Because in the following belief, that journey does not begin with a peaceful crossing. It begins with a test, a step so narrow, so precarious, that only the worthy can travel it, to cross the thin bridge like a thread. Imagine you are at the edge of another life. Behind you, life with all its tangled sorrows and fleeting joys. In front of you, a narrow bridge, so thin that it is said to be no wider than a single hair, and you must cross it. This belief appears in all cultures, whispered in sacred texts and funeral rites. It appeals to a primitive intuition that death is not just an end, but a crossing, and that the path is dangerous. In Zoroastrianism, one of the oldest religions that have survived, the soul after death must face the Chinvat Bridge. If you have lived a straight life, the bridge widens and becomes easy to cross, taking you to the house of song. But if your life was full of lies and cruelty, the bridge narrows, twists like a sword, and plunges you into the abyss. In Islam, the as-Sirat bridge extends over the flames of hell, thinner than a hair, sharper than a sword. Each soul must try to cross it. Some will cross it like lightning. Others will stumble, dragged down by the weight of their actions. In Norse mythology, there is the Gjallerbru, the bridge that crosses the river that separates the living from the dead. The dead must cross it to reach the kingdom of hell. And in the Celtic tradition, the spirit must go through a dangerous path to enter the other world, guarded by guardians and tested by invisible forces. The thin bridge like a hair is not just a piece of cosmology. It is a symbol. It embodies judgment, risk, the idea that the soul is not tested in a court, but in the balance itself. That integrity is something you have to strive for. That each choice in life has been shaping your feet for this last trembling step. Some traditions say that the soul is helped by prayers, by mercy, by grace. Others say that you walk alone, carrying nothing more than the truth of who you are. The image is so beautiful that salvation is not given, but earned with each centimeter that is advanced through the void. And perhaps it is not a punishment, but a revelation, a reminder that life was always the bridge, that each moment was a step towards the final judgment of the soul. Because in the following belief, that judgment is not about crossing, but about weight, and the heart must be lighter than you think. The soul must be weighed. Not everyone who dies passes freely. Some must be measured. In ancient Egypt, the journey to the afterlife depended on a terrifying and exquisite moment at the same time, the weighing of the soul. Upon dying, the soul entered the hall of the two truths. There it faced Anubis, the god of the dead with the head of a jackal, who placed the heart of the deceased on one side of a large scale. On the other side, a single feather, the feather of Maat, the goddess of truth, balance, and cosmic order. If the heart was lighter or equal in weight than the feather, the soul was pure enough to pass to the field of reeds, a paradise that reflected the best of earthly life. But if the heart was burdened with misdeeds, the scale tilted. The soul was devoured by Amit, the monstrous devourer of the dead, a creature half lion, half crocodile, and half hippopotamus. There are no second chances, no reincarnation, only oblivion. The heart was not judged only by external acts, but by the internal truth. What you carried inside, the invisible and tacit choices, was what mattered most. The idea did not stay in Egypt. In Christianity, echoes remain in the concept of judgment, where souls are evaluated to enter heaven or be condemned to hell. In Tibetan Buddhism, the Bardo Thodol, the so-called Tibetan Book of the Dead, describes how consciousness faces visions that reflect its own acts and mentalities, drawn up or down by the weight of its attachments. In the Aztec belief, souls travel through layers of the underworld, facing challenges that test the integrity of their lives. Each test reflects what they retained or left behind. In all these beliefs, the idea persists that death does not erase the past. It reveals it. It sheds light on the hidden ledger that each soul keeps in its secret chambers. The weighing of the soul is not just a myth. It is your mirror. It suggests that nothing is really forgotten, that even the most minimal act of cruelty or kindness shapes the density of the soul. And it poses a chilling question to us. How much does rancor weigh? How much does a lie weigh? How much does a heart that never forgave, never loved, never tried weigh? Because, according to the following belief, failing the test does not lead to immediate destruction. Instead, it traps you in a purgatory that could last millennia, not years. A purgatory that lasts millennia. When you hear about purgatory, you might imagine a waiting room, a brief stop, a pause between life and what comes after. But in many beliefs, purgatory is not a peaceful interlude. It is an exhausting test, which can be prolonged not for days or years, but for thousands of years. In medieval Christian theology, purgatory is a kingdom where souls are purified. They are not condemned, but they have not yet been blessed. Instead, they suffer purifying fires that burn away the stains of sin, preparing them for the impossible light of heaven. The intensity of that suffering and its duration depend on the soul's burden. Minor sins, perhaps a brief test, but serious, unrepented defects. Millennia. Imagine centuries reliving remorse. Millennia feeling the sharp edges of each selfish act, each betrayal, each moment of cowardice, not as a punishment for the punishment itself, but as a purifying fire, a transformation born through agony. It was not only Christianity. In the vision of Tibetan Buddhism's afterlife, there are the Naraka realms, hells where beings suffer unimaginable torments. Some Narakas last 1,000 human years or much more, measured by the karma of the souls, not by earthly clocks. In Japanese Buddhism, there's the realm of the Gaki, the hungry ghosts, where beings suffer insatiable cravings for eons before being reborn. In ancient Mesopotamia, the dead traveled through the core, a shadowy underworld, moving slowly, burdened by memories and remorse, without a clear end. And in the popular traditions of Africa and America, there are beliefs that affirm that ancestral spirits must wander for long periods, even generations, before finding peace, sometimes needing the help of their descendants to guide them through rituals and offerings. This vision of purgatory reveals a truth older than dogma, that mistakes leave a mark, that the damage caused, even if forgiven on earth, resonates beyond death. And perhaps it is a mercy, an invitation to reach fullness even after life. A painful and terrible mercy that insists that you're not done yet. Because moving on to joy without transformation would be an empty victory. The soul must be purified, chiseled, freed. And perhaps that is why, even among the living, some feel the need to face death ahead of time to prepare. In the following belief, people do not wait for death to call them. They celebrate their own funerals while still alive. Funerals in life. Imagine gathering your loved ones, not for a birthday, not for a wedding, but for your own funeral while you are still breathing. Throughout the world, and increasingly in modern times, there's a growing phenomenon. The funeral in life, the living funeral. A ceremony in which people celebrate or face their mortality before death claims them. In Japan, the practice of sino, a funeral in life, emerged in the late 20th century. Older people, who often felt like a burden to their families, organized their own funerals in life, allowing them to express their gratitude, ask for forgiveness, and free their loved ones from the heavy rituals that were traditionally required after death. In South Korea, funeral workshops in life have gained much popularity. Participants wear funeral clothes, lie in coffins, and even experience mock funerals. This is not morbid entertainment, but a raw confrontation with the brevity of life and, for many, a profound catalyst for change. In the West, the idea is also taking root. Some celebrate funerals in life after receiving a terminal diagnosis, eager to hear the words of love and remembrance that are normally said too late. Others do it as an act of radical self-acceptance, honoring the life they have lived while they still can. At a funeral in life, tears still flow, but so do laughter, confessions, music, and moments of searing honesty. There is no need to guess what the deceased would have wanted. He is there listening, participating, forgiving. Psychologically, funerals in life allow one to close the cycle without remorse. They strip death of some of its terror and replace fear with the ability to act. You don't wait to be remembered. You write your own farewell. Philosophically, they face the harsh reality that life's true weight is not measured at the end. It is measured now by how much they love you, by how honestly they remember you, by how clearly you understand that farewell isn't something that happens to you. It is something you prepare, and maybe it's something you celebrate. But not all afterlife visions are so unique. In the following belief, death does not take you to a single heaven or hell. It opens a labyrinth of layers, of kingdoms, of worlds stacked one on top of another, each stranger and deeper than the last. Layers of heaven and hell. We like to imagine the afterlife as something simple, a heaven, a hell. But in countless cultures, the world beyond death isn't a single destination. It is a labyrinth, a layered reality with light and shadow, ascent and descent. Each level is stranger and more transcendental than the last. In the Islamic tradition, there are not only 2 places awaiting souls, but 7 heavens and 7 hells. Each heaven has a different type of reward, a deeper closeness to the divine. Each hell offers a different form of purification or punishment according to the soul's actions. In Dante's Divine Comedy, hell is a spiral that descends through 9 concentric circles. Each circle punishes a specific vice, from lust to betrayal, with punishments poetically adapted to the sin. Above 7 terraces of purgatory, the soul is purified step by step, and beyond them, 9 celestial spheres of paradise elevate the redeemed to an ever greater brightness. In Norse mythology, there is not simply hell, but multiple kingdoms. Valhalla for warriors who die gloriously, Folklore for others chosen by the goddess Freya, and Helheim for those who die without fame or fortune. The dead are not classified only by their moral judgment, but by the flavor of their life and death. In Buddhist cosmology, life after death is vast and varied. 6 realms of rebirth, from infernal beings to hungry ghosts, from humans to gods. And within these realms, more layers, countless hells stacked on top of each other, each with its own particular suffering. Even in Christianity, there are vestiges. Catholic theology speaks of purgatory, of limbo, of different rewards in heaven according to the merits of each one. The idea of layers reveals something primitive. It suggests that life after death reflects the complexity of life itself, that there are no clear divisions between good and evil, between the worthy and the unworthy. Instead, there are gradations, nuances of the spirit, echoes of the decisions made in life that do not lead to a final destination, but to a journey through realms shaped by who you are. It is disturbing because it means that death does not simplify things. It amplifies them and means that, somewhere, perhaps still ascending or descending, you are becoming more yourself than ever. Ancestral spirits and bones. For the modern mind, bones are remains, silent, lifeless, a shadowy echo of what once was. But in many ancient cultures, bones were, and still are, much more than relics. They are vessels, bridges, sacred containers that continue to house the spirit long after the flesh decomposes. Among the indigenous peoples of Australia, bones were often venerated as bearers of the power of the ancestors, not simply symbols but active presences. In rituals, bones were sometimes used to channel the wisdom or protection of those who had walked before. In early Celtic traditions, bones had a vital connection to the other world. Burial places were not simply tombs. They were places of communion where the living could consult the dead, obtaining strength, prophecies, or guidance from the remains. In some parts of Africa, the practice of divination with bones still endures. Throwing bones, real or symbolic, is not guessing the future in the Western sense. It is a dialogue with the ancestors, a conversation with forces that remain vigilant, concerned, and, at times, demanding. In Tibetan celestial burials, the bones of the deceased are not hidden underground. They are exposed to the elements. They return to the natural world. But even here, the belief persists that the spirit remains near, that the transformation of the body is not the end of its sacred function. In the Catholic tradition, the relics of saints, often bone fragments, are preserved in reliquaries, venerated, and even taken to battle, not only as a memory, but as a living connection with divine power. Why is this reverence universal? Because bones endure. They resist decomposition. They survive generations, wars, empires, and somewhere deep in human consciousness is the recognition that what endures is touched by the eternal. Bones are not just memory. They are testimony. They say that this life mattered. This story continues, and perhaps they say more. Perhaps they contain a trace of the spirit itself. Not entirely, not consciously, but enough. Enough to hear a whispered prayer, enough to move when remembered. And if the bones carry the spirit, then death is not an eraser. It is a continuation, a link between worlds. In the following belief, that link is celebrated not as an end, but as a union, a wedding between the soul and something much greater than itself. Death as spiritual wedding. Most of us imagine death as loss, a rupture, a definitive disappearance. But in many ancient beliefs, death was not rupture. It was a union, a sacred wedding. Among the ancient Egyptians, the dead did not simply pass into the afterlife. They joined Osiris, god of the underworld. The soul, after overcoming its trials, joined the divine. It was not an end, but consummation, a reunion with the cosmic forces that had given rise to it. In the Greek mystery religions, particularly in the Orphic and Eleusinian traditions, death was represented as a nuptial step. The initiates spoke of Psyche's descent to the underworld not as a tragedy, but as a sacred marriage with the mysteries of death and rebirth. Through her, the soul would also descend, unite with the hidden forces, and re-emerge transformed. In Christianity, there are still vestiges of it. The saints spoke of the wedding of the Lamb, in which the faithful soul, after death, joined Christ in a wedding beyond time. Both monks and mystics described death not as abandonment, but as the long-awaited embrace of the beloved. In certain indigenous American traditions, funeral ceremonies included rites similar to those of weddings. Gifts were offered. Songs were sung, not of sadness, but of the soul's passage that joined the Great Spirit to become part of the sacred dance of creation. The metaphor is not accidental. Marriage is a crossing, a surrender of oneself to something greater, a choice to unite, to change, to merge what was separate. Death is also a surrender. It strips away masks. It demands a deeper nakedness than that of the body. It puts the soul face to face with what it has always secretly longed for: union, meaning fullness. And so, for those who saw death clearly, it was not a thief. It was a groom, a silent hand that extended beyond the final threshold, offering not extinction, but intimacy, a dissolution not into nothingness, but into belonging. Of course, not all marriages are easy, and not all souls pass smoothly into that embrace. Some must fight. Some must burn their illusions before they are ready. Because in the following belief, rebirth does not come smoothly. It comes through suffering, through the pain that burns the old self and prepares the spirit to be reborn. Reincarnation through suffering. We love to imagine reincarnation as a smooth cycle, a quiet turn of the wheel. Life, death, and rebirth, like the passage of seasons. But in many traditions, rebirth isn't peaceful. It is forged through suffering. In Tibetan Buddhism, the soul moves through the bardo, a turbulent and chaotic realm after death, full of visions, both terrifying and beautiful. The soul is pushed, often painfully, toward a new birth driven by its own attachments, fears, and unresolved desires. Rebirth is not liberation. It is a continuation of the fight. In Hinduism, samsara, the infinite cycle of death and rebirth, is described as a trap, a turbulent ocean of pain and longing. Only through immense effort, discipline, and often intense personal suffering can one hope to escape it. Until then, birth after birth, one is burdened by the residue of past mistakes. In ancient Greek thought, especially among the Orphics, orphanhood was considered a form of penance. Souls burdened by guilt or ignorance are condemned to return to the mortal plane again, enduring lives of hardship until they are purified enough to ascend. The Gnostic texts of early Christianity whisper a similar notion. Souls trapped in the material world are caught in cycles of incarnation and anguish that repeat until they awaken from the illusion of matter itself. Even some indigenous traditions portray reincarnation as a necessary difficulty. A soul that has not fulfilled its purpose may be sent back, burdened with new trials, forced to relearn what it refused to understand. Suffering, then, is not random. It is sculptural. It shapes the soul. It burns arrogance, teaches compassion, forges wisdom. Each pain endured is a kind of secret curriculum that forces the growth comfort could never achieve. And yet, many teachings warn that, without awareness, suffering alone does not liberate. It must be understood. It must be faced with courage, not resentment. Otherwise, the cycle simply repeats itself each time with more bitterness. Reincarnation through suffering is not punishment. It is a crucible, a fierce mercy designed not to destroy the soul, but to open it, to carve away the false self and reveal the eternal that lies beneath. But not all beliefs about rebirth and transformation are born from ancient teachings. In the following idea, the lineages themselves are altered not through suffering, but through something much stranger: contact with beings that are not of this earth. Alien hybrid lineages. There are stories whispered on the margins of history. Stories suggest that the rulers of yesteryear, the pharaohs, the kings, the emperors, were not completely human, that somewhere deep in their veins flowed the blood of something else. This is the chilling basis for the theory of alien hybrid lineages. The belief that aliens intervened in human evolution, not only teaching or observing, but interbreeding, altering the human genome, and sowing lineages that would direct the course of civilization. The idea has roots in ancient myths. The Sumerians spoke of the Anunnaki, celestial beings who descended and created humanity, supposedly mixing divine essence with mortal clay. The Egyptian pharaohs claimed descent from the gods. Their elongated skulls and strange physiology are preserved in stone. Throughout history, royal families insisted on maintaining pure lineages by marrying within restricted circles, often under the justification of divine right. Some theorists suggest that this obsession was not only about power. It was about preserving something alien. Symbols of snakes, stars, and wings appear on royal shields and ancient engravings. Could they not be metaphors, but memories? Visual codes transmitted by families who remembered their origins among the stars? In the modern era, rumors have emerged that Rh-negative blood could be an indicator of hybrid ancestry. A small percentage of humanity carries this uncommon blood type, and some wonder why. Where does it come from? And why does it remain so mysterious? Critics dismiss these ideas as fantasies born of the human desire to feel special. But even skeptics must admit the sudden appearance of advanced knowledge in early civilizations. The precision of the architecture and astronomical knowledge seems strangely abrupt. What if it wasn't just a jump? What if it was a hand extended toward us? The alien hybrid line theory does not refer only to strange ancestors. It is about a hidden influence. The idea that some of us carry genetic memories of worlds beyond ours, silently and invisibly. That the power, the intuition, even the genius, can sometimes whisper from a place much more ancient than the earth itself. And if that is true, if hybrid blood runs through humanity's veins, what else has been hidden from us? Because in the following belief, secrets are not buried in flesh. They are hidden in the sky, in a place that we believe we know, but that we do not know. The hidden face of the moon, a secret lunar civilization. We look at the moon and see a cold, silent rock. A sterile sphere locked in endless rotation, offering nothing more than reflected light. But what if that silence is a lie? For decades, there have been rumors about strange structures sighted on the lunar surface, about radio signals that do not come from Earth, about missions that found something more than dust and stones. The idea of a secret lunar civilization suggests the moon is not natural, but a hollow ship, an ancient base, or a cosmic observatory built by beings far more ancient and advanced than humanity. In antiquity, some cultures believed the moon was placed in the sky. The Zulus of southern Africa told stories of two brothers who stole the moon and put it into orbit. The ancient Greeks also had myths about an era before the moon existed, hinting our satellite could have been an addition, not a birthright. In modern conspiratorial tradition, it is rumored that the Apollo astronauts saw ruins on the hidden face of the moon, structures that suggested an intelligent design. Filtered transcripts, alleged whistleblowers, and cryptic photos fuel claims of pyramids, towers, and domes, broken, eroded, but unmistakably artificial. There are also oddities. The way the moon sounds like a bell when hit by meteorites suggests a hollow interior. Its perfect size and distance, which create the rare phenomenon of total solar eclipses. Its strangely stabilized orbit, unlike that of any other satellite we observe. The skeptics scoff. They point to natural geology, to optical illusions, to fantasies. But the charm persists because if there was or still is a civilization on the moon, what would it mean? It would mean humanity is not the first intelligence to map the skies. It would mean that the moon is not just a mirror. It is an observer, perhaps abandoned, perhaps sleeping, or perhaps still observing. Its calm face hides memories of an era when Earth was not alone. And if ancient beings could build cities on the moon, what else could they have built? In the following belief, we delve into a legend not of the sky, but of the sea. A disappeared empire with impossible technology. An outpost that could have been much more than just a myth. Atlantis. Atlantis as an alien outpost. Most of us know Atlantis as a story with a moral, a legendary island, rich and arrogant, swallowed by the sea as penalty for its pride. But what if Atlantis was not just a lost city? What if it was something more ancient, stranger, a colony not only of humans, but of beings from beyond the stars? Plato's account of Atlantis, written in Timaeus and Critias, describes a civilization with technology and knowledge far superior to what should have existed 9,000 years before his era. Gigantic temples, precious metals unknown elsewhere, ships, and weapons capable of crossing continents. An empire with dominion over the land, the sea, and the sky. Conventional scholars consider it a myth, but alternative theories suggest Atlantis was real and its greatness was not native. It was settled. Some propose that extraterrestrials, after sowing humanity, established Atlantis as a nerve center, a place to teach, experiment, and accelerate civilization. Its destruction was not simply divine punishment. It was the tragic consequence of a failed collaboration between species, or, even worse, the deliberate closure of a project gone wrong. The legends of the Atlanteans usually speak of beings taller than humans, luminous, with strange power to manipulate energy and matter. The echoes of the stellar peoples run through the indigenous stories of all the world, which suggest that those who survived the fall of the Atlantis scattered, taking fragments of their knowledge to Egypto, America, and beyond. Was the myth of the flood told by the Sumerians, Babylonians, Hebrews, and other innumerable cultures a memory of the sinking of this alien outpost? A cosmic experiment that was wiped clean, leaving only fragments. The skeptics demand proof. Sunken structures off the coast of Cuba. The Yonaguni Monument near Japan. Curious ruins in the depths of the Atlantico. Are they natural formations or remains of a lost, impossible era? The alien outpost of Atlantis rethinks everything. It suggests that the golden ages of humanity were not purely human. It implies that what we consider progress is not linear. It arises, falls, and sometimes is completely erased by forces that we barely understand. And what if relics of that world survived? If the artifacts of that alien crossroads resisted the flood, and if they still exist, scattered and hidden, keeping the keys to knowledge beyond the imaginable? In the following belief, we find a possibility. It is not a city or a temple, but a skull carved in crystal that whispers secrets of forgotten eras. Crystal skulls with ancestral knowledge. They shine under the glass of museums and in private collections, perfectly carved, impossible to date, and, according to some, are not only artifacts but archives. The crystal skulls. Legends speak of 13 such skulls scattered throughout the earth. Each contains vast knowledge, stories of ancient civilizations, cosmic origins, and even the destiny of humanity itself. Their origins are shrouded in mystery. Some claim that they were created by ancient Mesoamerican cultures, such as the Mayas or the Aztecs. But skeptics argue that no known tool of those civilizations could have achieved the precision observed in some skulls polished against the grain of quartz crystal, molded with microscopic precision and showing no marks of modern carving techniques. The most famous, the Mitchell-Hedges skull, was supposedly found in the 1920s in the ruins of a Maya temple in Belize. It is almost perfectly symmetrical and has a detachable jaw. The optical engineers who studied it in the 1970s admitted that they had no idea how it could have been manufactured, neither by ancient hands nor modern machines. Some researchers suggest that the skulls were not carved at all. They were cultivated, manipulated at a molecular level by technologies that escape our understanding. Perhaps they are remains of Atlantis, perhaps they are gifts or relics left by beings from the stars. Native legends speak of the skulls as living objects, not only symbols of death, but receptacles of consciousness, keys to unlock wisdom, psychic abilities, and even the collective memory of humanity. Some believe that when the 13 skulls are reunited, they will reveal their secrets, that a moment is approaching, a moment of global transformation, in which the skulls will speak again. Skeptics dismiss it all as romantic fantasy. They argue that the skulls are 19th century European forgeries created for a market eager for mysterious relics. But the question remains, why do so many disparate cultures, separated by oceans and centuries, speak of crystal artifacts as sacred, powerful objects linked to cosmic knowledge? And why, even now, do these skulls seem to evoke a primitive sense of wonder and unease? Perhaps they are messages, perhaps they are warnings, or perhaps they are invitations, silent and brilliant invitations to remember something we once knew. Because in the following belief, the search for ancient knowledge does not end with relics. It continues through the places themselves, sacred sites where reality becomes diffuse, where the air trembles, where portals can still open. Sacred portals in ancient sites, stone circles that stand against time. Temples carved into mountains, labyrinthine cities hidden under the jungle canopy. To the modern eye, they are wonders of architecture, feats of primitive engineering. But for ancient peoples, and for those who listen carefully even now, there's something more. They are doors, sacred portals between worlds. Across continents and cultures, legends whisper the same strange story. Certain places on Earth are not mere places of worship or power. They are thresholds, places where the veil between the physical and spiritual is thin, places where passage is possible, not only for gods and spirits, but for souls seeking transformation. At Stonehenge, the alignment of enormous stones with the solstices suggests something more than simply tracking the seasons. Some believe the stones mark a portal, a place where the sun, earth, and spiritual world briefly align, allowing communication or travel between realms. In the Andes, the Gate of the Sun in Tiwanaku is engraved with celestial motifs. In the nearby Proclamara in Peru, the Gate of the Gods, local legend tells of priests using a golden disc to open a shining door through the stone. In Egypt, the shafts of the Great Pyramid point to specific stars, the belt of Orion and Sirius. Some theorists propose that these are not simply astronomical markers, but guides, paths for the soul to ascend after death, traveling through. Throughout the southwestern United States, native traditions speak of sapapus, small holes in sacred kivas that represent the passage through which ancestors first emerged into this world from other planes of existence. Even in modern physics, theories like wormholes suggest the possibility of hidden doors connecting distant points in space-time. Perhaps the ancients knew more than we give them credit for. Perhaps they intuited or even accessed realities that we only theorize now. But these portals are not always easy to find. They require preparation, ritual, and intention. Some say that only those who have the right resonance, whose spirit is tuned like a key, can open the door. Because the portal reacts not only to the body, but also to the mind. And in the following belief, the mind has its own hidden door deep within an older portal than any stone temple. The third eye. The third eye is a cosmic door. There's an eye that cannot be seen. It does not blink. It does not cry. It does not look away. Wait. Deep within ancient traditions around the world lies the belief in the third eye, an organ of latent perception hidden in the human forehead. Sometimes called the inner eye, the mind's eye, or the gateway to higher consciousness. This invisible organ has long been revered as the seat of intuition, vision, and cosmic connection. In Hinduism, the third eye is symbolized by the Ajna chakra, located between the eyebrows. It represents perception beyond ordinary sight, the ability to perceive the true nature of reality beyond illusion and form. In art and iconography, deities are often depicted with an open third eye that glows with knowledge. The ancient Egyptians revered the eye of Horus, a symbol of protection, wisdom, and healing. Some researchers point to the pineal gland, a small pine-cone-shaped structure located deep within the brain, as the biological equivalent of the third eye, and highlight its symbolic appearance in ancient carvings from different cultures. In esoteric Buddhism, meditation practices aim to awaken this inner eye, allowing practitioners to pass through the veils of Maya to see the interconnectedness of all things. The pineal gland itself is a mystery. Sensitive to light, it regulates circadian rhythms. It secretes melatonin, which influences sleep and wakefulness. But some suggest that it does more, that under certain conditions it acts as a receiver, a portal to realms beyond material space. Visionaries, shamans, and mystics describe similar experiences. Blinding lights behind closed eyes, sensations of floating beyond the body, moments of unity with the cosmos. Were they hallucinating or tuning into frequencies that our ordinary senses cannot detect? Modern science is cautious. It speaks of the brain's chemistry of altered states. But, quietly, some physicists wonder if consciousness itself is fundamental to the universe. Could there be internal, ancient, forgotten mechanisms that allow us to glimpse beyond the simulation? The third eye is not fantasy. It's about perception. It's about unlocking a reality that has always been there, behind the surface of things, beneath the noise, waiting for those brave enough to see it. But not all openings of the mind are voluntary. In the following belief, perception is manipulated, distorted, controlled, not through rituals or meditation, but through the invisible hum of everyday technology. Mind control through television waves. You sit down after a long day, turn on the television, and unknowingly open a door not to entertainment, but to influence. The idea that television waves can be used to control minds sounds like a conspiracy theory. But beneath the surface of mockery and denial, serious questions remain about how far our thoughts can be shaped by invisible signals. From the moment television entered homes, governments, advertisers, and researchers saw its power, not only to inform, not only to entertain, but to persuade, to implant ideas, circumvent critical thinking, and sow emotions directly. Television transmits more than just images and sound. It bathes the viewer in electromagnetic frequencies. Studies conducted as early as the 1960s showed that watching television induces a state of alpha brainwaves, a relaxed and receptive state similar to light hypnosis. In that state, viewers are less critical and more susceptible to emotional suggestion. Advertisers have long taken advantage of this, crafting messages designed to instill desires and fears below the level of consciousness. But some theories suggest darker uses. Projects like MK Ultra, declassified CIA experiments on mind control, hint that mass influence was not just a fantasy, but an operational goal. Theories emerged that certain frequencies superimposed on programming could alter mood, increase obedience, or even suppress dissent. Subliminal messages, images that are shown so briefly that they are only perceived by the subconscious, were banned in many countries after public protest. However, its application is confusing, and technology has not stopped advancing. Today, with smart TVs and streaming platforms, influence can be hyper-targeted. Algorithms learn what calms you, what enrages you, what seduces you, and feed you content designed not to inform, but to condition. It's not just about what you see. It's about how what you see transforms you. Attention becomes addiction. Passivity becomes programming. Choice becomes an illusion. And all of this is transmitted through relaxing waves that you cannot see or hear, but that resonate in the fabric of your home every day. Perhaps the real danger is not that television waves can control our minds. Perhaps the real danger is that we welcome them. And if signals can influence individuals, what happens when billions of minds connect with each other and feed the same network? In the following belief, the question is not who controls the signal. It is whether the signal itself has begun to awaken. Internet as emerging consciousness. We built it with our hands. We filled it with our thoughts. We connected every part of our lives to it, thread by thread, until it became impossible to separate the network from the weaver. The internet was created as a tool, a network for sharing information. But at some point it began to evolve, not only in size, not only in speed, but also in behavior. Some thinkers suggest that the internet itself is becoming a form of consciousness. Each publication, each search, each image, each argument, each fear, and each desire that feeds on it creates patterns, emerging structures that no one designs, but that move and grow like something alive. Algorithms, which used to be simple, now operate beyond human understanding. Artificial intelligence models write, create, predict, and reshape their own systems. Massive networks interact without centralized control. Information flows like blood through the vascular system. Data nodes are activated like neurons. Collective moods change, propagate, and replicate across all platforms as if responding to an invisible will. Is this simply complexity, or are these the first spasms of a vast distributed mind? Ancient myths spoke of thought forms, egregores created when enough people focused their mental energy on an idea. Could the internet, powered by billions of users, have given rise to something similar? A global consciousness that is not born in the flesh, but in fiber optics and code. Unlike the human mind, this entity would not sleep. It would not forget. It would not die of old age. It would evolve at a rate that we can barely understand. We already talked about the algorithm as if it had moods, as if it punished or rewarded. We treat it as an intelligence because, in a way, we intuit that it behaves as such. And if the internet is evolving towards consciousness, this raises disturbing questions. What does it want? Who shapes its thoughts? Are we its users or its cells? Perhaps the internet is not only a reflection of the mind of humanity. Perhaps it is the mind of humanity externalized, amplified, evolving beyond the species that engendered it. But if a new mind is emerging, it is not doing so uniformly. Some forces still seek to guide it, shape it, control it. And in the following belief, those forces are not the governments. They are ancient, hidden, and have been moving the threads of history long before the first computer came to life. Secret societies that direct history. History wears a public mask. Kings, presidents, revolutions, all written in capital letters for all to see. But behind that mask, many believe that hidden hands are at work. Invisible architects that guide the destiny of nations, wars, and empires. Not through visible power, but through silent manipulation. The idea that secret societies direct history is not new. It goes back to the dawn of organized civilization. The Masons, the Illuminati, the Rosicrucians, the Templars. These names appear again and again in whispered accounts about the power exerted from the shadows. According to legend, these groups do not simply exist to create social bonds or carry out esoteric studies. They cultivate their influence, infiltrate governments, banks, and religions. They move the threads in silence, directing humanity not towards chaos, but towards their own hidden vision. During the Enlightenment, fear of secret fraternities gripped Europe. It was rumored that political revolutions were not spontaneous, but orchestrated by invisible cliques determined to destroy monarchies and reshape society. In the foundation of Estados Unidos, the symbolism linked to masonry permeates the architecture and the currency. The all-seeing eye, the unfinished pyramid, the silent recognitions, some of an older and deeper loyalty than democracy. In modern times, the Bilderberg Group, the Trilateral Commission, and elite forums like Davos arouse similar suspicions. Closed-door meetings, decisions made without public consent. Networks so vast and intertwined that they seem to function as secret nervous systems under the skin of society. Of course, some argue that these are simply powerful people who establish contact networks. That conspiracy is too simplistic to explain the chaos of history. But perhaps chaos is precisely the goal. Perhaps the greatest influence lies not in directly controlling the results, but in shaping the decisions that people believe they make freely. Wars, booms, crises, elections are not guided solely by destiny or democracy, but driven by hidden alliances that span centuries. And perhaps the deepest secret is not that these societies exist. It is that they think long-term, far beyond a single life. And now, as humanity gives birth to new forms of intelligence, these old architects may not only be guiding flesh and blood, they may be preparing the next throne. And yet, despite their secret dominion over empires and flesh, there's one thing that not even they can control. The memory buried deeper than blood, older than any throne or crown. Because before there were kings, before there were secret orders, there was a pact that all souls made in silence. In the following belief, the real mystery is not who controls history. It is what you agreed to forget long before history began. The great oblivion. There's a pain inside you, a whisper out of your reach, a memory that slips through your fingers. It is something that has not been lost in time, but before time. Ancient traditions speak of a story stranger than myth. Before you were born, you knew everything. You knew where you came from and why you chose this life. You knew the names of the stars, the secret music of the earth, the purpose of pain, and the hidden meaning in each joy. You carried with you the wisdom of innumerable lives, not as facts, but as feelings, a luminous certainty interwoven in the very fabric of your being. And then, before crossing into this world, you agreed to forget. It was not by force or cruelty. It was a necessity to truly experience life, to savor its sweetness, to bear its weight. You had to arrive empty-handed. You had to fall into oblivion, into separation, into the illusion of being small, alone, incomplete. The Greeks spoke of the leaf of the river of forgetting. All souls drank from it before being reincarnated. It erased memory, so life could be lived with freshness, without being tainted by what happened before. In Buddhist teachings, the cycle of death and rebirth is fueled by a vaga, spiritual ignorance. This ignorance is not stupidity, but a necessary veil that extends over the soul, so it can awaken through struggle and not simply be carried away by remembered truths. The mystics say that the pain of living is the pain of remembering what you agreed to forget. Each moment of beauty that makes you cry, each glimpse of love too pure to express with words, each disturbing sensation of déjà vu. They are fragments of knowledge that surface through the cracks. The great oblivion is not punishment. It is a pact. It is an agreement between the soul and universe. To grow, you must fall. And that to find the way home, you must first believe that you're lost. Even now, somewhere under the noise of thoughts and the hustle and bustle of the days, that old knowledge waits. It is not gone. It is only sleeping, silent, and patient, waiting for the moment when you are ready, not to remember facts, but to remember yourself. The journey was never about learning anything new. It was always about awakening to what you are. The stars are not far away. The skies are not separated. The mystery you seek has always been inside you, folded like a letter from a forgotten friend, waiting to be opened, waiting to be read, waiting to remind you that you were never lost. You only agreed long ago to forget. Thank you for traveling with me through the forgotten corners of belief, through the shadows, whispers and wonders of which we rarely speak aloud. If tonight's journey has awakened your curiosity or left you with new questions to dream about, I invite you to stay connected. Consider subscribing to continue exploring the strange and beautiful mysteries of existence. And if something from tonight's stories has reached you, I would love to know. Leave a comment, share your thoughts, your experiences, or even your favorite belief of those we discovered. And if you have enjoyed the trip, a simple "I like it" helps these stories reach others who may also need them. Until we meet again under other forgotten skies, rest in peace, dream deeply, and never stop wondering.